This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate 7th part of What If Naruto Was Trained by an Assassin. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
As dawn broke, Karen, Teams 7 and 8, and themselves hurriedly made their way out of the Forest of Death, eager to continue with the Chunin exams. Karen and Ino stayed close to the Team 7 members, and Hinata took the lead, occasionally scanning the area with her Byakugan in search of potential enemies. Naruto trailed behind, his clones moving surreptitiously along the flanks, concealed and alert for any enemy who might attempt to attack the formation's purportedly vulnerable flanks. Fortunately, it didn't appear like they had any issues because the majority of the teams were either still working in other parts of the forest or had already been dealt with, either dead from a forest hazard, dead at the hands of another team, disqualified for losing their scroll, or having already completed. Even though Team 7 was completely recovered, thanks to Karen, they took their time to ensure they were well. In Sasuke's case, the curse seal was still causing him pain. He experienced both physical aches and what felt like inflammation both inside and around the seal. They made a quick stop for lunch and rest as midday approached, with Naruto's shadow clones keeping watch. Karen approached Naruto while they were eating their rations, appearing a little uncertain. "May we talk?" she inquired. After giving her a quick blink, Naruto nodded. He said, taking a bite out of his ration bar and blanching, "Sure. What about?" The ration bars were convenient to carry and eat in the field, and they were loaded with all the nutrients one could want. However, they lacked flavor and appeal. He grimly concluded it while his recently found clansman helped her gather her thoughts before she spoke at all. Her statement, "I want to stay here, in Konoha. I don't want to go back to Kusa," caused Naruto to sigh. "Considering what you've said, I can't blame you, but that's something we have to take up with Hokage Sama. And there's no guarantee anything will come of it," he continued. Karen gave a sympathetic nod. "I know, but, please, if we can ask him, if they can work something out. Please?" she pleaded. Naruto touched her shoulder with his hand. "Of course we'll talk to him. I'm just saying it'll be a bit difficult is all. But we'll talk to him and convince him to try," said the man. "I appreciate it," Karen grinned in relief. I don't want to end up like my mom. And, you're the only family I know of that I have left, even if we are barely even blood related," she stated. Naruto simply laughed quietly. "Karen, if there's one thing I've learned growing up here in Konoha, it's that blood doesn't make us family. I have people who have no blood relationship to me, who are as close to me as any blood family member could be," he continued. Karen merely nodded and grinned before stiffening up and turning her head, her red eyes widening and then narrowing. She muttered, "There's a chakra signature that way. It's somewhat faint but drawing nearer, slowly." With a subdued nod, Naruto turned to face Hinata. He said, "Hey Hinata, can you come here?" He spoke softly as the former Hyuga joined him. He glanced at Karen and said, "Can you do me a favor and discreetly look for incoming enemies? She's detected something coming in." Karen gestured silently in the direction where she felt the chakra, and Hinata silently called upon her bloodline, casting a quick glance with her 366-degree vision before scowling. She stated, "3 chakra signatures. Close together. I'd say high genin to mid chunin," just before her scowl got bigger. After noticing their front head protections, she concluded her report, saying, "They're drawing closer to us. They're from AIM." At that, Naruto gave a nod. He turned to face her and Karen and said, "They'll probably try an ambush, either taking someone hostage or using genjutsu. Let's warn the others, but make sure they keep quiet." The two kunoichi nodded, and the three approached their allies in silence. Soon after, the 3 AIM genin, also referred to as Team Oboro, ducked down and observed the 2 genin teams in the clearing a few feet away. They were all wearing the same yellow jumpsuit, and they all had rebreathers in their mouths and dark blue forehead protectors with fabric with AIM's emblem, 4 straight lines, running beneath their chins. The white cloth covering their eyes was the only distinguishing feature between them. Oboro, the leader, was covered in bandages around his left bicep and had 2 eye holes cut into the white cloth. With the same white cloth covering his eyes, Kaguri's vision appeared unaffected even though no eye holes were visible. He had spiky brown hair, just like Oboro. Mubi was the final member of the team. Only his left eye was visible due to the same white sash covering his eyes. But his forehead protector completely encased his entire head. Oboro recognized one of the 2 genin teams and grinned. He remembered that he had tried to pass for Kiba but had been discovered and driven away. "Well, seems I'll be getting my revenge on those twerps for earlier," he remarked. He now had the opportunity to exact revenge with his team. But Mubi, his teammate, scowled as he examined the genin. Oboro, they've got a Hyuga with them. Our genjutsu won't work with her there, he replied. Oboro grinned and said, then I guess we just use the clone technique to overwhelm them. And besides, once they're distracted with the clones, we'll throw up a couple genjutsu to affect the others, while we focus on taking the Hyuga down. With her gone, they'll have no way to detect our genjutsu, he continued. Kagari, Mubi, you'll handle the Oboro Bunshins. Haze clones. While I create the Mizu Bunshins. Water clones, now get ready, he stated. The three of them started to channel their chakras and get ready to perform their jutsu hand signs. However, the shadows from above suddenly fell upon them as they prepared to perform their jutsu, forcing them all to the ground and swiftly restrained them. As three of Naruto's cage Bunshin entered the clearing and pushed the bound aim genin in front of them, Team 7 and 8 looked up. Kiba blinked, then let out a growl. He pointed to Oboro and exclaimed, that's the asshole who tried to ambush us when I was taking a leak. After blinking in response, Naruto shook his head, deciding not to inquire about the tale. He turned to face the aim genin and remarked, well, looks like they were going to try again. The question is though, what do we do with them? We don't need their scroll, if they even have one. With a scowl, Sasuke reached up to grasp the aim shinobi's shoulder, where the curse mark was located. They've shown to be a persistent threat, so we could always kill them, he growled, his voice a little darker than usual. Sakura scowled as she put her hand on Sasuke's arm, causing him to tremble and shake his head while inhaling deeply. His dark suggestion indicated that even though he hadn't used the seal since yesterday, it was obviously still having an impact on him. Let's just tie them up and leave them here, Ino replied. They'll probably escape on their own soon enough, and if they don't, I guess they best hope they're found by someone who will help them, she continued. Kiba, Karen, and Hinata all nodded in agreement. Sakura, though, appeared a little uncertain. It seems a little insensitive, doesn't it? She murmured. Considering they were about to attack us and probably try to kill us, I don't think so, replied Hinata. We're giving them a far better chance than we could expect from them. The AIM team did nothing but glare at their captors and stay silent, though they could feel perspiration starting to form under their forehead protectors as they heard the genin discussing what to do with them. Naruto squatted down in front of the three AIM genin, grinning. The clones swiftly moved and started taking away the AIM genin's ninja tools, leaving them in a small clearing nearby. Guess it's your lucky day then. We won't kill you, unless you come after us again, he said. After that, they tied them up more firmly while the other members of Teams 7 and 8 finished packing and prepared to depart. With his ninjutsu drawn, Naruto approached Oboro's neck. He said, just remember that we chose to let you live, this time. If you try to come after us again, you won't be so lucky. He then slightly withdrew his blade, severing Oboro's jumpsuit and leaving a thin line of blood on his neck. He said, to help you remember, and then he cleaned and put away his ninjutsu. The three AIM genin were left stranded and defenseless in the clearing by the Konoha teams. The clones he had left in the clearing waited a short while before moving on. Even so, Sakura continued to frown and look back as they hurriedly departed. This doesn't feel right. Just leaving them like that, she responded. The others blinked at Naruto in surprise. Don't worry. A couple of my clones stayed behind and are watching them from cover. If worse comes to worse, they'll save them, he said. Sakura felt a little better and said, oh, well that's good. She may have accepted that killing people was a necessary part of being a shinobi, but she wasn't used to the idea of killing someone in cold blood or leaving them to perish. She felt bad about leaving those AIM genin to the mercy of the forest or other teams, but Naruto's admission that he left clones behind to keep an eye on them mostly allayed her guilt. After an uneventful journey, they reached the tower around noon and proceeded to enter through a door located at the base of the tower. However, upon entering, they discovered a sizable entrance area with a huge plaque leaning against one wall and no obvious means of exiting. Glancing around, Naruto scowled. They could see no further direction, so he said, well, this is a bit anti-climatic. Sakura blinked as she read the plaque. She said, a little engrossed in the reading and oblivious to everyone staring at her, I think this inscription tells us how to get out of here. It mentions the heaven and the earth. I think it's referring to mind and body, and how we need to have both in order to be strong shinobi or something like that. She turned to face the others and said, maybe we need to, since they mentioned heaven and earth, and we have those scrolls, because they mentioned W. What? Suddenly, she felt self-conscious because she knew everyone was staring at her. No, please continue. Ino smiled and touched her shoulder. You think we need to use the scrolls? Sakura gestured to the inscription while nodding. With a slightly quieter voice, she continued, it mentions heaven and earth, and we've got heaven and earth scrolls. So, I think we should open them. As Naruto took a quick look at his scrolls, Kiba questioned, but we were told not to by the proctor. Wouldn't we be disqualified? Well, what else would we do with them? Asked he. They gave us the scrolls, but don't give us anyone to drop them off or hand them off to here. And there's nowhere else we can go. So, I guess we open them, and either we're disqualified, or we advance, he stated. Does anyone else have any ideas? After giving each other a quick glance, everyone shook their heads. Naruto then produced the scrolls that his group possessed. As Ino and Hinata joined him, he said, Okay, Team 7, why don't you move against the wall there, and wait. Maybe, if things go wrong, it'll just be our team disqualified. After Team 7 and Karen had positioned themselves against a wall, Naruto turned to face his teammates, who gave him a nod. He took out the Earth Scroll and handed it to Hinata, and they both opened and unfolded them together. Naruto recognized the summoning seal instantly because he had studied seals personally. He yelled, "Drop them," and dropped one scroll. Hinata followed suit. Smoke billowed from the center of the summoning seals, enveloping whatever was being called upon, and the two scrolls appeared to be drawn together, crossing each other. Team 8 had assumed combat stances, but they had to blink when the smoke cleared and Iruka appeared. His eyes widened as he blinked, recognizing Team 7 and Team 8. You're both safe. Hokage. Sama ordered us to watch out for your teams and to bring you to him at once. He's been waiting in the tower since he received your summons and clones, he said, giving Naruto the final directive. Please, follow me. With a gesture of his hand, some seals on the walls came into being, activating and sliding the section of wall they were on sideways to reveal passageways behind them. He went straight over to them, Team 7, Team 8, and Karen trailing behind him, all of them with confused or worried expressions. The wall behind them closed as the last of them went in. They trailed Iruka through multiple hallways and staircases, ultimately reaching an office door with a pair of Junin on watch. As the second one went into the room, the first one lifted a hand to stop them. He reappeared after a short while, fully opening the door and gesturing for them to come in. Prior to their arrival, Iruka halted Team 8. He smiled and nodded at them all. I'm glad to see you're all right. I'll be sure to let Yugito know you're okay as soon as possible, he said. They gave a nod in return and hurried into the room. With the exception of the absence of windows, the office resembled the Hokage's quarters in the main tower. Anko, Kakashi, and Ibiki, the proctor from the first exam, stood on either side of the desk, waiting for the Hokage, who sat behind a desk and smoked quietly. Sarutobi took the pipe out of his mouth and cautiously emptied it into an ashtray before continuing. Then the door closed behind them. I'm glad to see you all arrived safe and sound, he replied. And I'm sorry for the trials you had to go through inside the forest. While I would say they're perfect examples of what can happen out in the field, having to survive fighting a Sannin is definitely not something I'd expect or want you all to go through, he said with a sigh. We wanted to debrief you all as quickly as possible regarding the events that both your teams went through, regarding Orochimaru and the Kumo Shinobi. I do feel the most pressing issue at the moment is Orochimaru, so we will start with that. I need you to tell us what happened, and in detail. After exchanging glances with one another, Sasuke moved forward to provide an update on the events. He described how, at first, they were ambushed by someone they thought was Akusa Kunoichi, who appeared to be far more formidable than them. Before she confronted them once more, they had made an attempt to escape while the Kunoichi called upon snakes to guide them. When Sasuke got to the point where he was going to give the scroll up, he took one look at Naruto. It was at that point that Uzumaki Sans clones found us, he stated. At that, Naruto gave a nod. One of my clones came across what was going on and decided to intervene. They managed to shoot and kill the Kunoichi from behind, only for the Kunoichi to disperse into a mud clone. The real Kunoichi found me and attacked me with a jutsu that I've only ever seen my sensei use, the Senei Jashu, striking snake technique. Considering there is only one other person who utilizes that technique, my clone figured out it was Orochimaru who revealed himself after my clone joined Team 7. My clone attempted to give them time to run, but was easily defeated, while a second clone that joined them intercepted and defeated one of his larger snake summons, though it had to sacrifice itself in the process, reported that. Kiba recoiled slightly at the mention of that, his feelings still battling within him. He gave Sasuke a quick glance before Sasuke took over. He touched the spot where the seal was and said, Orochimaru engaged us at that point. I tried to slow him down, perhaps giving us time to escape, but Orochimaru faked being injured, causing me to lower my guard. That's when he bit me. Anko stepped forward instantly as her eyes snapped open. The other adults tensed, and Naruto snapped. "Let me see where he bit you," she demanded. With a mixture of confusion and fear, Sasuke blinked at her. What? Anko nearly cried out, "Let me see," as Sasuke swiftly pried the shirt collar off to reveal the curse seal at the base of his neck. Anko felt her heart sink as her gaze fell upon it. Whispering, "Fucking damn it," she turned to face the Hokage. "He didn't just give him a curse seal, he gave him the same one he gave me," she continued. Sakura's gaze expanded. Anko touched her own shoulder lightly, and she asked, "Why? You have the same seal as Sasuke-kun?" With her eyes slightly glassy, she said softly, "Yeah, I do. It was a parting gift from my sensei when he left me in one of his labs. A prototype he had developed." Her sudden appearance startled Sakura, Kiba, Sasuke, and Ino, and made Hinata and Naruto's faces darken. That caused Sarutobi to scowl before gesturing for Anko to step aside. He asked Team 7, "Is there anything else?" as Anko shifted to the side with her shoulders a little hunched. At this point, Sakura took up the story. "Why? Yes. After Orochimaru bit Sasuke, he claimed that he had given Sasuke power, and that in time, Sasuke would come to him for more. After that, he left us," she replied. However, I think Orochimaru is connected to that shinobi village, Otogakure," she continued. Sarutobi questioned her, "What makes you say that?" While Ibiki paid closer attention because this might be important information. "We were attacked by the genin from Oto. But they weren't interested in our scroll. They were solely interested in Sasuke, claiming they wanted to kill him. And the leader of the group, he seemed to react when I guessed they worked for Orochimaru," Sakura stated. I know it's not anything concrete, Hokage-sama, but..." Sarutobi extended his hand. "No, it's quite alright, child. We shinobi often work on hunches and gut instincts just as much as we do on reliable information. Ibiki-san, we will discuss this matter after the genin have been dismissed," Sarutobi said with a nod. Then Sarutobi turned back to face Sasuke, giving him a close-up look. He asked, observing Anko and Kakashi tensing up. "Tell me, did the seal activate? Did it affect you in any way?" Sasuke cast a sidelong glance. "It did, Hokage-sama. When the Oto team was fighting my teammates and Rock Lee from Team 9, I started to awaken. I could feel power flowing through me. Unbelievable power. When I saw what had happened to my team, I was so angry, but I think I was drunk on the power the seal was giving me. I attacked the one Oto genin, fully intent on crippling them, before killing them," he continued. Silently, he uttered, "If it weren't for Sakura, I would have attacked Team 8 in an attempt to obtain the Oto genin." After letting out a deeply troubled sigh and tapping his pipe on the desk, Sarutobi said, "I want you to find Jiraiya and tell him to come here immediately." A Junin then entered through the open door. "He should be close to the hot springs," he remarked, furrowing his brow at the predicament and the likelihood that his pupil would be engaging in his typical mischief. "What you were feeling was the power of the seal," Sarutobi said to Sasuke as the Junin nodded and vanished in a shunshin. "It was intended to function similarly to a drug, causing you to become dependent on its potency and want to use it more and more. Jiraiya of the Sannin will place a restraining seal upon it to ensure you are not threatened by it, and it doesn't help that the more you use it, the more it corrupts your personality as well," the man said. "Thank you, Hokage-sama," Sasuke said, bowing, with a quiet nod. Sarutobi merely nodded, gesturing with his pipe to Kakashi. "Kakashi, bring your team to the tower infirmary so they can be examined. After that, you can lead Sakura and Kiba to the tower, where their team's quarters are located," he stated. "At once, Hokage-sama," Kakashi said, sweeping quickly to his team and dragging them from the room before Sarutobi turned to face Team 8 and their tag-along as the door closed. Now let's move on to the following matter. The remains of Kumo's teammates and the Kumo shinobi you sent us, Naruto, have arrived," Sarutobi remarked. Ibiki-san did question him, but there wasn't much more to learn that wasn't already in the report your clones gave us. Sarutobi scowled as Naruto nodded and then blinked. "Unfortunately, there isn't much more we can do right now. Although this Chunin exam violation would ordinarily enable us to censure and chastise Kumo diplomatically, we lack hard proof. But Hokage-sama, the information I gathered," Ino gasped at that. "I was cut off just as I started. Wouldn't be credible as proof. Many of the bloodlines and special clan jutsu in our village that can manipulate or interact with the mind and soul allow Kumo to easily assert that the information was planted in his mind falsely. At this point, all we can do is alert Kumo to our suspicions without providing substantiated proof from a different source that cannot be refuted by debunking claims. Having said that, though, I won't take this offense lightly. Don't worry, the incident from 10 years ago won't happen again, he remarked, glancing at Hinata, who tensed up a little. Now, may I ask who your acquaintance here is? Sarutobi turned to Karen, drawing Hinata and Naruto from their thoughts. Both of them scowled, not liking that Kumo might not be punished for what had happened. He inquired. Hokage. Sama, I am Karen Uzumaki, a genin of Kusa, Karen said, her voice quivering a little. This wasn't just the head of one of the main 5 villages, he was the Shinobi no Kami, one of the most formidable and renowned shinobi in history, and here she was, in front of him. It's nice to meet you, but why are you here? Sarutobi asked Naruto, whose slight nod indicated he already knew, as both of his eyes widened at her surname. Anko's eyes also widened. You ought to be with your team, right? He inquired of her. Karen announced, not seeming overly sad, my teammates are dead. A wild bear killed them. With a note of pride in her voice, she continued, and it would have killed me, if not for the intervention of my clansman and his team. I came here with them, because I seek to leave Kusa and join Konoha. I see, the Hokage remarked with a small frown. Is there a particular reason you want to leave Kusa? I'm afraid we might not be able to easily grant your request, depending on the circumstances. With a hint of fear mixed with hope, Karen nodded slightly as she said, my mother and I both have a unique ability regarding our chakra. My mother suffered from overuse and exhaustion as a result of Kusa taking advantage of her skills and abilities. They used up my mother, not caring about her, and now they plan to do the same to me, the woman remarked. And the Kusa leadership has already shown signs of planning to exploit me for the same reason. I beg you, Hokage. Sama, please. Allow me to join your village, please, she practically pleaded, her eyes moistening a little. I see. That makes things more difficult, as most likely Kusa will not want to let you go, sighed Sarutobi, a tired man, as he sat down. Can you please tell us what this ability of yours is, so we'll know what we'll be negotiating for exactly, if it comes to that? He asked. Karen shifted a little, uneasy about showing off her special ability. Naruto and his allies had seemed easy to trust because they were genin like her and he was family, but this was different. The Sandaime Hokage was an extremely skilled shinobi, and from what she'd seen, Shinobi would be more interested in using an asset for the village than in helping someone out. Still, she decided to trust him after he gave her a small nod of encouragement, and she slowly rolled up one of her sleeves to reveal the bite marks. When someone bites me, and drains my chakra, it heals them of their wounds, Karen said softly, not looking him in the eye. Sakura.san and Kiba.san from the other genin team both were healed by me using this method. Karen Uzumaki, I will see what can be possibly done about getting Kusa to agree to allow you to join Konoha, Sarutobi said, nodding as he took in the bite marks and Karen's statement about her mother. I cannot guarantee more than that at the moment, but I will try. Karen sighed deeply as he nodded. Anko, please take your team and Karen to one of the empty rooms, where they can rest until the second exam is completed. Sarutobi ordered as Karen nodded quietly, part of her feeling elated, part worried he only said that because he learned of her worth. Indeed, Hokage. Sama. If Kusa-sensei comes looking for Karen, what should I do? She inquired. Sarutobi said, tell him I wish to speak with him as soon as possible, lighting up his pipe in order to decompress. We will need to tread carefully when negotiating with Kusa, Sarutobi muttered to Ibiki as the door closed, nodding to Anko as she herded her team and Karen out the other side. Ibiki said, Hokage. Sama, we have more than information to coerce them into agreeing, but the Hokage merely shook his head. That is not acceptable. They will harbor resentment toward us as a result. Furthermore, Kusa is positioned between us and Iwa on our western border. Sarutobi puffed on his pipe and remarked, this is quite troublesome. If we agitate them and give them reason, they'll turn against us and allow Iwa an advantage in any future conflicts. I can't dispute that Karen would benefit the village, though. Her skill would be very helpful to our medical teams, but it would be even more beneficial if she received medical shinobi training. Furthermore, having another Uzumaki here would aid in the possible reconstruction of that Konoha clan. There's no doubt that this will be worthwhile. However, we have a far more pressing issue to deal with right now. That's correct, Jiraiya? He asked aloud. When a ceiling tile slid aside, Jiraiya entered the space and exclaimed, you've still got it, sensei, before becoming serious and asking, so my old teammate was here, and he used his seal to infect someone else? Yes, and this time it's worse. It's a sophisticated and comprehensive seal. We'll have to act fast to seal it, Sarutobi remarked. I'm pretty sure the seal I put on Enko Midarashi should work, but I'll have to study it first. He'll be exhausted and disoriented for a day or two, but that's normal, Jiraiya added. Good, nodded quietly Sarutobi. He sighed with exhaustion and said, get right on it, Jiraiya. That's at least one problem easily dealt with. Jiraiya scowled a little and said, Sensei, this doesn't look good. If Orochimaru is coming out this way, he must have something big planned. Many missing nin have been drawn to the rumors of something big being planned, which my spies have been hearing. And it seems to me that Orochimaru is at the core of it. After a few moments of silence, Sarutobi finally said, I shall increase security inside the village, as he sat there, holding his pipe and nodding quietly. If Orochimaru has any plans, we will need to make an effort to stay one step ahead of him. So you'll be staying in the village, I take it? He inquired. This will be the best place to keep an ear out for Orochimaru if he has an interest inside Konoha, the Toad Sannin said, nodding in agreement. And I think it's about time I started training Naruto, he concluded, his voice becoming more assertive. Is that so? Sarutobi looked up at him, her eyes narrowing a little. Why specifically did you decide to choose this time around? He inquired. He's my godson, and since I'll be in the village, what better time to begin training him? Jiraiya shrugged, he inquired. And this of course wouldn't be part of a plan to try and pull Naruto away from the assassins, would it? Sarutobi asked him, giving him a weary but determined look. He inquired, noting that Jiraiya made no response. They would undoubtedly want Naruto to receive the greatest instruction possible. According to our insider, Akatsuki is beginning to take action. If Naruto is to survive them, he's going to need all the training he can get, Jiraiya thought. The elderly Hokage shook his head, saying, Jiraiya, use caution. Go and take care of Sasuke's seal. You risk alienating Naruto even more from yourself in your misguided attempt to protect him, Sarutobi remarked, taking a seat back. We'll discuss this in more detail later, he muttered. Ibiki, who had been silent the whole time, turned to face his leader as Jiraiya simply bowed. As you command, Hokage. Sama, he said, turning and walking away to tend to Sasuke's seal. Sarutobi just sat there, still staring at his pipe. Hokage. Sama, do you have any orders for me? He inquired. Without glancing at him, Sarutobi nodded. Assemble any available Anbu and have them begin stepping up security in the village. And designate clandestine patrols to look for any spies, he gave the order. Sarutobi rubbed his eyes, slumped in his chair, and allowed himself a moment to relax, and drop the strong, powerful leader persona he had to maintain as Hokage, as he simply tried to absorb and handle the growing weight of problems on his aged shoulders. Ibiki nodded and shunshined away, leaving Sarutobi with his thoughts, as an already unusual exam was becoming more and more complicated and dangerous. A Konoha Chunin materialized from the summoning seals, and his eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing the Kumo forehead protectors. Congratulations on passing the second portion of the Chunin exams, he said. The next part of the exam will not be announced until the end of this test, so you'll be allowed to rest here until then. Meanwhile, at the base of the tower, the team of Karui, Samui, and Omoi had just arrived at the tower and was even now opening their scrolls. But I have to let you know that your team will be under observation the entire time you are in the tower because of an incident involving one of your fellow Kumo, Genin, he said. Karui gave the Chunin a quick glare. What is this bullshit? Karui exclaimed. What happened? She made a demand. With a calm expression on her face, Karui met the Konoha Chunin and said, We understand, though I would like an explanation. Samui then put a hand on her shoulder to restrain her. I regret to inform you that I am out of current information. When your sensei shows up at the end of this exam, he will be able to tell you more. As he turned to leave the entrance room and opened the secret passageways, he said, Please follow me. As they followed their escort, Omoi cast a nervous glance at his two teammates and asked, Do you think they know about the plan? He muttered. With a smack to the head, Karui shot back, They will if you don't shut up, moron. Samui simply did not say anything, her gaze fixed on their escort's back, slightly narrowed, calculating, determined to find out what had happened. 8 quarters team after 2 days in the tower, with the last of the teams arriving before the deadline passed, Naruto checked his equipment one last time, carefully running a whetstone over the edge of his ninjutsu, while Ino and Hinata checked their weapons and equipment as well. At last, the second test of the Chunin exams was about to come to an end. There wasn't much for Naruto to do in the tower. There were a few training rooms, but each was watched over by Chunin to make sure there was no spying or foul play between the various genin teams. There was also a mess hall where they could eat, train, and hang out with other genin, and of course sleep. Each quarter had 3 beds and a full bathroom attached. Since Karen was staying with Team 8, Naruto had chosen to take the floor and let the 3 girls take the bed, as well as rigged a blanket to provide privacy and act as a screen. Karen had spent the last 2 days getting to know her kinsman and his teammates, as well as some of their friends and acquaintances from the other teams, but now that the test was almost over, she would probably have to get back in touch with her sensei, who would definitely try to get out of Konoha as soon as possible with her once he found out her teammates were dead. She didn't want to leave, of course, but there wasn't much she could do unless the Hokage could persuade him to let her stay while he negotiated with Kusa. She hoped he could. When the 3 girls were done, they all stood there smiling. "Well, it's time to go," Naruto said, and the 3 girls nodded. Naruto blinked, seeing Sasuke for the first time since they arrived at the tower, as the 4 left their room and soon joined the rest of Team 7. Sasuke was taken from the infirmary to a special sealing room, where Jiraiya of the Sannin applied a seal to contain Sasuke's curse mark. Based on what Sakura had told them, Sasuke was knocked unconscious during the sealing process due to the pain and the drain on his chakra, but Kakashi, who had told Kiba and Sakura about what was happening, said that the sealing process went much more smoothly than if he had tried to put the seal in place. Sasuke was expected to recover in a few days. And sure enough, Sasuke looked a little better than he had, even though he still appeared worn out and a little bit paler than usual. Nevertheless, he carried himself and his team with poise and assurance as they joined Team 8 and moved toward the tower's main hall. They soon found themselves inside the enormous hall, which was largely empty except for the wall across from them, which had a huge set of stone hands carved in the shape of holding the ram hand sign. Before the stone hands, the floor rose slightly, resembling a miniature stage, and close to the entrance, 2 sets of stairs to either side led up to balconies that ran along either wall. A number of the other genin teams that had advanced were arranged in a column in the middle of the room, facing the back wall where their sensei now stood, together with the Hokage, Ibiki, and the purple-haired Anbu Proctor. Karen hovered around the door, while Teams 7 and 8 broke apart, making their way to the open areas in the formation, surveying their competition. Teams 9 and 10 had also arrived, along with the genin from Suna, the other genin team from Kumo, and the Auto genin team. The only other team was Kabuto and his 2 teammates, who were both dressed similarly to Hinata, except that one of them had small round sunglasses on over his lower face, and the other had regular glasses. Though Naruto blinked, he saw that all of the Kumo genin were staring at him. The red-haired Kunoichi glared angrily at him, the white-haired boy appeared a little nervous, and the blonde stared at him blankly before turning to face forward. With a small shake of his head, Naruto turned to face Anko, who nodded and grinned confidently at them, and the 3 of them grinned back. Then, his gaze moved to the middle of the mini-stage, where Sarutobi had moved forward. "To everyone who passed this section of the exam, congratulations. By making it this far, you have all demonstrated your bravery and strength and brought honor to our villages," he remarked. "Given your current level of progress, I think it's appropriate for you to comprehend the actual goal of the Chunin exams. These are more than just a way for the different villages to raise genin to the level of Chunin. Beyond that, they signify much more. Do any of you know the reason or reasons why nations, empires, or villages go to war with one another?" he inquired of them. Before the red-haired boy from Suna, Gaara, spoke, the genin fell silent. "To kill your enemies and ensure your survival," he said coldly, making some of the genin shift nervously. "That is something you do in war, but not why you start one, in most cases," Sarutobi stated. Neji then raised his voice, saying, "To serve justice against those who have hurt or attacked you," with a sidelong glance at the Kumo genin. "That is a justification people will give for why they go to war, but rarely is it the actual reason," Sarutobi stated. Sakura finally said, "F. For prestige and power?" She asked, half, said. "Indeed. Power, prestige, and resources are the main reasons people declare and fight wars," Sarutobi said. "They also did for land, natural resources, slaves, and labor. However, they also act out of fear and respect. The more opponents you defeat, the more renown and influence you possess, and the more victories you have. Nations that vanquish rival nations and assert their sovereignty are more likely to fend off invasions, and other nations are more inclined to want to maintain good relations with them by extending favorable trade deals or tribute. However, how is this related to Shinobi villages? We do not appropriate land or claim resources belonging to other nations. What use does war then serve us? For status and authority." He told them, "The reason for the Shinobi wars we have fought and every small skirmish in between has been to show the potential of our villages, to gain more clients, to have greater power and money. to attract customers and demonstrate that our village is the strongest. However, how is that related to the Chunin exams? As a few genin nodded in agreement, Tenten asked him. Sarutobi took a slow puff from his pipe before continuing, saying, there was a big issue with the battles our forefathers fought. Frequently, they were nearly as expensive as the prizes that would be awarded to the winners. Countless innocent bystanders lost their lives merely because their village was caught in the crossfire. Whole generations suffered severe injuries or were on the verge of extinction. Consequently, the 5 Kage met and discussed starting a proxy war. Instead of fighting one another, the shinobi villages would stage a competition where the best and brightest would compete. Numerous clients from throughout the land would then assess the strength of the villages and choose which ones to offer new assignments and jobs to. In an effort to put an end to the expensive wars while maintaining the benefits that came with them, this competition became known as the Chunin exams. You are here today for that reason, too. For the honor, respect, and future power of your village, you, the younger generation, are fighting this proxy war. The genin scowled as they listened, but their attention was diverted when a shinobi appeared beside the Hokage. He had sickly pale skin, bags under his eyes, and was dressed in the traditional Konoha shinobi uniform, with his brown hair covered in a bandana style forehead protector. Hokage. Sama, I believe it is time for me to take over the proceedings, the shinobi said, bowing his head while crouching with one knee on the ground. I am Special Junin Hayate Gecko, and I am the proctor of the next portion of the Chunin exams, the shinobi said, coughing into his fist. The elderly Hokage nodded and moved back. Normally, at this point we would be talking about the exam's final test, but something has gone wrong. We anticipated that more teams would be removed from contention after this section of the test. Therefore, in order to at least reduce your numbers by half, we must hold a preliminary round. With his arms cuffed, Zaku gave an enraged growl, saying, what kind of bullshit is that? We passed your pointless exam. We are worthy of a spot in the finals, he yelled. Well, aside from me telling you that life is not fair, and doubly so for a shinobi, there's also the fact that if we allowed all of you into the finals, they would not only take far too long, but that they would grow tedious over time, Hayate said, squinting his eyes slightly at the impudent boy. Would you like to watch more than 20 matches, complete with the necessary breaks in between for the competitors to recover and get ready for the next round? The final exam serves as both a show and an entertainment for the clients in addition to being a test for you. I will be proctoring a preliminary round here, where you will be randomly selected to face each other in 1-on-1 matches, Hayate said, evoking angrily from Zaku who remained silent. To defeat your opponent, you are free to employ every single one of your skills. Whoever can kill their opponent, render them unconscious, or coerce them into giving up wins. However, let me emphasize that we would much rather you avoid killing as much as you can. I expect you to follow my instructions and decisions during this match. I understand that if I tell you to get down, you will do so right away. He turned to face the wall and nodded to someone he could not see, and as soon as they did, 2 panels slid up to reveal 2 large screens. The participants in each fight will be chosen at random and shown on this screen, he said. Until your name is chosen, the others are asked to join you and your sensei on the balconies. Once your battle is over, you can either head back to the balcony or, if you're not already being taken there, ask to be taken to the infirmary so they can check you over for injuries. Does anyone want to forfeit right now, before we start? Very well, Hayate nodded, and everyone fell silent, looking around to see if anyone bowed out. Sakura in particular appeared nervous and was fidgeting a little bit. In the end, though, nobody did so. Start the selection procedure, he yelled. The genin waited to see who would fight first, and immediately names started to flash by randomly on both screens. Before long, however, 2 names finally appeared. Sasuke Uchiha versus Kabuto Yakushi. Sasuke, stay here with Kabuto. Everyone else, please go to the balconies, Hayate commanded, and with haste all but the 2 genin headed for the balconies, where their sensei joined them. The 3 rookie Konoha teams, starting with Team 9, occupied the balcony on the right side from the doorway, where Karen joined Team 8. Kabuto's team occupied the other balcony, along with the foreign teams. The 2 genin were now facing each other on the floor, Kabuto fiddling with his glasses to make sure they were secure, and Sasuke rolling his shoulders and reaching up to rub his left shoulder, feeling some annoyance there as well. And, fight, Hayate said, glancing between the 2 of them before raising his hand, he yelled. The 2 immediately started moving, leaping at each other. Sasuke, the Sharingan, was the first to act, hurling 2 shuriken at Kabuto. Sasuke drew his own blade, and Kabuto sidestepped them, drawing out a curved knife as he readied himself for hand-to. hand combat. The collision of their blades sent sparks flying as metal on metal met. The elder genin made an effort to overcome Sasuke with his superior strength, but Sasuke ducked under him, dropped the kunai, picked it up with his other hand, and slashed at Kabuto, pushing him back. Pressing the attack, he flipped the kunai back to his right hand. Kiba smiled and leaned over the rail, holding onto it. He exclaimed with excitement, "Yeah, go Sasuke. Show him the strength of Team 7. Sakura stood next to him, watching and holding onto the rail. Though she was concerned about how severely the sealing procedure might have impacted Sasuke, she still had faith in him. Not to mention that the genin he was up against had a few more years of experience. As Sasuke continued to press the attack, she firmly grasped the rail. With a quiet groan, Kabuto deflected another blow from Sasuke. He dodged a punch from the Uchiha genin, but Sasuke spun and kicked him in the face, forcing Kabuto to block with his forearms. He was knocked back a few feet by the blow before he stopped and reformed his stance. But Sasuke was already wrapping up a series of hand signals. He inhaled sharply and started firing fireballs at Kabuto, making him sidestep before attempting to charge Sasuke. Leaping back, the Uchiha genin completed another hand sign and sent forth a much larger fireball that smashed into the ground where Kabuto had been standing, igniting an explosion. The Oto Junin observed the fight from the railing, appearing uninterested, but if one could look closely, they would see a look of both delight and disappointment as the smoke cleared and the slightly burning crater where the fireball had landed was visible. After jumping over the fireball, Kabuto landed and looked at the crater and then at Sasuke, who was once more brandishing a kunai in preparation for the next battle. Gradually, Kabuto positioned himself, holding his own kunai, and examining Sasuke. Abruptly, he launched a standard kunai forward, forcing Sasuke to sidestep and directly into his attack. Sasuke could hardly turn his head to the side as the kunai's curve cut his cheek, causing blood to flow. The genin wearing glasses grinned at that, only to have Sasuke strike him hard in the stomach, causing him to lose consciousness. With a swift motion, Sasuke brought down his kunai, feeling the blade pierce flesh as his eyes widened. However, Kabuto vanished in a puff of smoke, to be replaced by a rock in which Sasuke's kunai was embedded. Just as Kabuto tried to slash up at him through the floor, Sasuke quickly leapt away. After landing and skidding back, Sasuke looked at Kabuto, who was also breathing heavily, and panted a little. In an attempt to come up with a strategy to win the fight, he tightened his grip on his kunai and raised it into the ready position. In taijutsu, at least, he and Kabuto appeared to be about equal, though Kabuto had a few more years of experience than him. Furthermore, if those info cards were any true reflection of his abilities, Kabuto appeared to know quite a bit about them. He needed to spring a surprise quickly if he was going to win this fight. Kiba leaned over the railing with a growl. "Come on Sasuke, hurry up already. Stop playing around with this guy," Kiba yelled. When Sasuke looked up at him, he saw Lee on the railing as well, and he blinked. His eyes grew a little wider as he recalled the little altercation prior to the first exam, with the intention of testing himself against the Rookie of the Year and seeing if his diligence could overcome a natural genius. Lee had challenged him to a fight. Even with his Sharingan activated, the fight had been fairly won. Cited as Lee had defeated Kiba, who had charged Lee with conceit, before defeating himself. But he had remembered imitating Lee's moves during the fight. Now, a small frown forming on his face, Sasuke wasn't entirely fond of the thought of using moves he'd unintentionally stolen. While his mother had always taught him that it was dishonoring to simply copy and use your friends' and allies' laborious techniques for yourself, his father would not have objected. However, it was the only thought Sasuke could muster at the moment. He nodded, closed his eyes, and hurried over to Kabuto. The elder genin braced himself, about to charge, but blinked when Sasuke appeared to disappear in front of him. That is, until he felt something strike his chin, sending him flying through the air. Lee could only stare in shock as Sasuke executed his Omid Renge, front lotus, kick flawlessly before vanishing and reappearing behind in the air with the Kage Buyo, shadow of the dancing leaf. He mutely remarked, "Those are my techniques," surprised that Sasuke had been able to replicate them so precisely. Sasuke swiftly spun around in midair, raising his left leg to kick Kabuto in the side, causing him to scream in agony. He abruptly moved away from Kabuto with that leg, putting himself in a spin, slipping under his back, and bringing his left arm down in a bar across Kabuto's neck. He then carried on spinning to drive a right hook into Kabuto's face before landing a right heel drop directly onto Kabuto's stomach and sending him into the ground. As Sasuke leapt swiftly away from the smoke and debris explosion, Kabuto lay there in the crater, twitching and moaning. As Hayate got closer to the elder genin, he noticed that he was still standing and raised a hand. He announced, the match goes to Sasuke Uchiha, as paramedics hurried onto the arena to gather Kabuto. A few of the spectators, both Genin and Junin, cheered for Sasuke as he sagged a little and panted softly. Kiba smiled as he stepped back up to the walkway where his team was standing. He gave Sasuke a back slap and said, "Alright, way to go, man." Sakura gave him a smile. She grinned and said, "Sasuke-kun, that was really great." Thanking them for their congratulations, Sasuke nodded before scowling and advancing past them to where Team 9 was positioned. He walked up to Lee and then stopped. "Lee-san, I wish to apologize for stealing your moves and utilizing them. My mother taught me that it is wrong to use an ally's technique unless they give permission," he said with a bow. At that, Lee blinked once before grinning and giving him the thumbs up. "It is all right, Sasuke-san. I am pleased and honored that my moves could help inspire your flames of youth and bring you victory. Though now, I'm more motivated than ever to prove that my hard work is superior to your natural-born genius," he replied. Sasuke nodded, his face a little flushed. As he made his way back to his team, he thanked Lee-san and heard Lee's sensei Guy enthusiastically congratulate his pupil on a wonderful display of youth. The name selector started spinning again as the arena floor was rapidly fixed, ready to choose the next two fighters. All eyes were fixed on the screen, waiting to see if their name was called. The generator eventually came to an end, displaying the names Tenten and Samui. With Lee and Guy encouraging her, Tenten smiled as she leapt to the ground, Samui descending her walkway slowly behind her. Tenten observed her rival, attempting to assess her. She had pale skin, light blue eyes, and straight blonde hair that reached the top of her neck. She appeared to be around her age. Her outfit consisted of a gray, short, sleeved kimono with a black skirt that hung down to her knees and an armored corset around her waist with the Kumo emblem pinned to the front. Her armored bracers, high toeless boots, and a mesh shirt peeking out from under her kimono top completed the ensemble. Upon seeing the tanto sheathed at her waist, Tenten's eyes narrowed. Samui turned to face Tenten and noticed her pink sleeveless top, her green pants that were a little too baggy, and the scrolls hanging at her hips. Tenten's hands went down to her kunai pouch as she rested her left hand on her tanto hilt, poised to draw at a moment's notice. Seeing they were both prepared, Hayate nodded. He screamed, "Fight," and jumped back. Tenten drew a kunai at the same instant that Samui drew her tanto and held it in front of her with a reverse grip. With a smile on her face, the kunoichi with buns spun the kunai around her finger, then threw it at Samui, who deflected it. Tenten drew several shuriken and launched them at Samui with lightning speed. Samui quickly started to move closer to Tenten while dodging and blocking each shuriken with a quick step. Tenten did not stop smiling as she produced several more shuriken. She caught them in her fingers and threw them at Samui, forcing him to move aside to avoid getting hit by any of them. Tenten then reappeared a short distance away. She did not anticipate, however, that Tenten would pull on secret cables that were fastened to every shuriken, turning them into tiny spinning yo-yos that swung in Samui's direction. Samui leapt over two more and ducked under another, blocking another and severing the wire that held it. But a fifth sliced through her arm, snatching blood. As she landed, her gaze narrowed slightly and she glanced down at the flesh wound before turning to face Tenten, who was pulling on the wires to summon the shuriken she still controlled. Tenten smiled as she fired them once more, directing their trajectory to strike Samui from various directions with her interconnected wires. Samui moved aside once more as the shuriken struck the ground, and then he leapt swiftly to cut the wires, thereby robbing Tenten of all control over them. Tenten scowled and threw herself back, reaching for a scroll. "You seem to be quite skilled with that knife," she remarked, praising her adversary. Samui remained silent and prepared herself once more, her expression unchanged from the start of the match. Karui leaned over the rail and growled on the walkway. With gritted teeth, she muttered, "Hurry up and end the bitch already," as Omoi looked at her anxiously. "Hey, take it easy, Karui. You know there are Konoha Shinobi who can probably hear us, right?" he murmured. "You don't want to start an incident, do you?" Karabi touched Karui's shoulder before she could reply. Karui moaned and he said, "Calm your heat, Karui-chan. I know you ain't Konoha's biggest fan." She whispered, "Stop it, sensei," as the struggle went on. Now that Tenten was hurling shuriken and kunai at her, Samui was going all out, charging in and attempting to get close. The kunoichi with the bun pulled out several senbon and threw them at Samui, who parried most of them with the exception of two that went through her shoulder. At that, she hesitated a little, reached up, pulled them out, and tossed them aside. Tenten took that as an indication to step it up, and she pulled out one of her scrolls to reveal a variety of weaponry, including a mace, several spears, axes, and swords. She plucked each one out of the air and threw it at Samui, who appeared a little taken aback at first, barely avoiding the heavy weaponry she hadn't anticipated being hurled at her. Tenten winced because her opponent was still swift enough to avoid or block her blows. It slightly damaged her pride because she had been practicing accuracy training and hitting targets with perfect strikes. Her accuracy had helped her defeat a number of criminals, bandits, and genin in the past, but it appeared Samui was quick enough to avoid her. Tenten dropped the scroll she was using and took out 2 more, placing them at her sides as she knelt down, deciding to deliver the final blow. "Soshoryu. Ninja art. Rising twin dragons," she exclaimed, watching as the 2 scrolls, encircled by dragon-shaped clouds of smoke, shot skyward in a spiral. Amidst the pair of spiraling scrolls, Tenten leapt to his feet, rapidly conjuring additional weaponry contained within the scrolls and hurling them towards Samui. Samui scowled as she continued to leap away, deflecting blows that came her way and eventually landing with her back up against the arena wall just as the final weapon struck the ground. She yanked her hands back and looked up to see Tenten smiling, the Konohaku no Ichi. Tenten smirked as all the weapons, like the shuriken she'd used earlier, were yanked back on almost invisible wires, creating a giant mass of weapons hovering in the air. She simultaneously threw them all at Samui and exclaimed, "This is the end." When the weapons rocketed toward Samui, all that could be done was gape in horror and amazement. And yet, without missing a beat, they all veered off course and crashed into the wall surrounding Samui or the ground in front of her. Tenten could only look on in shock and dismay as Samui stood there with her body covered in crackling lights. With a stoic voice, she said, "I don't think the idea of being a pincushion is very cool," slowly reaching to grab weapons on either side of her. She had used the crackling lightning to create a temporary reverse magnetic field around herself, but Tenten was startled when the lightning shot up the metallic wires and into the weapons. She started to scream in agony as she was electrocuted and then dropped to the ground, landing hard. Samui lowered her hands and lay there spasming and twitching. "I think she's finished," she stated icily. As Hayate got closer, she noticed Tenten was immobile and gave a nod. "Tenten is unable to fight. Samui of Kumo is the winner," he stated. Samui watched as one of the medics approached Tenten and offered to tend to her wounds, then another picked her up and hurried her to the infirmary. As she observed a few shinobi remove the weapons in order to return them to Tenten once she recovered, she nodded. Her eyes then shifted to Naruto's position. Seeing those icy blue eyes fix on him and become harder as she stared at him, Naruto scowled. When she eventually turned away and went back to her team after receiving treatment, he stared back, frowning, refusing to back down. The woman standing next to him scowled at Samui's behavior and glanced up to see Karui glaring at Naruto with much more intensity. She whispered to Naruto, "Okay, did you do something to piss off Kumo?" "Not that I know," he remarked as Zaku and Shino, the names of the next 2 competitors, were announced. The 2 genin made their way to the field, Hayate glancing worriedly at Zaku's arms. He questioned Zaku, "Are you certain you wish to fight?" Zaku yelled, "Just start the fucking match already," as Shino narrowed his eyes and observed him. Asuma laughed and took a drag from his cigarette up above. "I pity that boy. Even if he was fully healed, I don't think he'd stand much of a chance," said the man. Anko gave him a quick glance and arched an eyebrow. He questioned, "Oh? He that good, huh?" "You have no idea. Shino might be quiet and may not look like much, but he can be pretty ruthless at times, when it's called for," he said as the match started. Shino stood behind his sunglasses and watched his opponent impassively. "I would suggest you forfeit. You are at an obvious disadvantage, and I would not wish to exasperate your injuries more," he said quietly. But Zaku just gave an enraged growl. He yanked his right arm out of its sling, revealing that it was not as bad as he had made it seem. "You think you're hot shit, huh? Part of a famous clan in a big shinobi village? You think you're better than me? Well, you're fucking not. I fucking hate people like you, who think you're so much better, looking down on people like me. Well, fuck you," he exclaimed. "Guess I'm not as injured as you think." With just an eyebrow raised, Shino stepped aside as a slashing wind ripped through his position, slashing the wall behind him. Shino only sidestepped once more as Zaku unleashed another slashing wave at him, then dodged again as a third one came at him. With a growl, Zaku fired off a barrage of blasts, all directed either ahead of him or at Shino. Shino avoided all of them, making progress nearly to the opposite side of his starting point. Abruptly, he charged forward, doing something that most people would not have expected of an Aburame. He actually moved close enough to punch Zaku, cutting his cheek with a right hook. After being struck, Zaku whirled around, but he capitalized on the momentum to turn away from Shino and raise his dominant arm to blast him nearly point blank. Shino was flung backward, slamming into the wall before exploding into a writhing horde of black insects that charged at Zaku. Simultaneously, Shino materialized on Zaku's other side, grasping a kunai. Shino's monotone voice said, "It seems you have a choice now. You can either deal with my insects or me, or you could surrender," said Shino. "But you cannot take us both out." With an arm raised to glare at the insects, Zaku finally smiled. Pulling out his other arm and pointing it at Shino, he exclaimed, "Hey, you think so, wouldn't you? You superior arrogant bastard. But looks like I've got an advantage you didn't think of," he yelled, "Say goodbye," as he got ready to send cutting air waves towards Shino and his insects. But instead of creating pressure waves that slammed into Aburame and his horde, Zaku's arms swelled and air spurted out of different places in them, causing him to scream in pain and have his arms fall uselessly at his sides. As his insects swarmed around them, Shino moved up next to him and turned back to face him. "While it was clever of you to try and look weaker than you really were, it was easy to surmise that if one of your arms was functioning, the other would be as well," he stated. "When I punched you, I used that moment to place some of my insects onto you, to block up your air holes in your arms. Afterwards, I simply had to distract you so my insects could finish blocking up the airways. Once you attempted to attack me, well, you see what happens," he continued. With a growl, Zaku swung his arms towards Shino, but Shino parried the blow and launched Zaku skyward. "I think Proctor is finished," Shino said, stepping aside. Hayate nodded while Zaku moaned as he lay there, unable to move because of his broken arms. "Zaku is unable to fight. Shino is the victor," he stated. The Auto Junin moved away from the wall as Zaku was taken away, telling Dosu and Kin, "I'm going to see to Zaku." Both of them just nodded, but Dosu gave him a fierce look as the Junin walked away. As everyone waited anxiously, the name generator started running through the next two contestants. Two new names eventually surfaced: Gaara versus Masumi Tsurugi. Recalling the carnage they had witnessed in the forest and thinking that one of the Suna shinobi was responsible, Team 10 became tense at that point. Meanwhile, Naruto became more focused since he could now observe his fellow Jinchuriki in action. Tenten lay in one bed at the infirmary, unconscious and sedated, while the medics worked on Zaku's arms. Kabuto, though, appeared to be dozing. That is, until he opened his eyes after sensing a slight change in chakra. He watched as the Auto Junin walked straight over to Kabuto's bed, entering the room and ignoring him. As he spoke, he grinned. "Greetings, Orochimaru. Sama. I'm touched you're here to check on me." The Auto Junin laughed like a snake. "Ah, my dear Kabuto-kun. I am glad to see you're alright. Your fight with Sasuke-kun was almost believable," he replied. "Now that you fought him, tell me what you think," he replied. Kabuto took a comfortable seat before continuing. "He seems skilled, for a genin. He has the potential to a powerful shinobi, if he's focused in the right direction. However, it does seem that someone has already sealed the seal you gave him. The fight I put him through should have caused it to activate, at least once," said Kabuto. "I noticed the same as well. There are few people with that level of sealing knowledge. For them to do it and Sasuke to already be in condition to fight means most likely that it was my old teammate, Jiraiya," Orochimaru said with a scowl. "That complicates things to a degree." "Indeed, Orochimaru. Sama. I've also noted something, watching Sasuke in the village and such. He seems driven by a sense of justice, wanting to bring his brother in for the crimes he has committed, as well as protecting his family and clan. It might be harder to lure him away from Konoha," Kabuto said. Quietly, Orochimaru nodded. "Nobler intentions are harder for me to manipulate, but I'm sure that Sasuke will see the benefits of coming to me, when the time comes. Continue your charade, Kabuto-kun. I'll have need of your services soon enough," Orochimaru said, getting up to leave. Kabuto said, "As you will, Orochimaru. Sama," as he returned to bed and felt the little genjutsu Orochimaru had displayed fade. Many in the arena were experiencing mild nausea as a result of what they had just seen. The fight had amounted to little more than a bloody execution, having lasted only a few minutes at most. As soon as the fight started, Masumi charged Gaara, but he was instantly thrown back by a stream of sand that smashed him into the wall. After that, he was lifted up and smashed into the ground a few more times before his broken body was raised and displayed for everyone to see. Before Hayate could say anything, the sand completely engulfed Masumi and violently closed, cutting off Masumi's cries and supplications for mercy. Before Gaara pulled the sand back, some blood spilled out of it and hit the ground, leaving behind a twisted mass of flesh, bone, and fabric. Gaara's expression remained completely expressionless the entire time. The only movement he had made was when he had lifted one hand and crushed the sand with his fist after Masumi was taken prisoner. Declared the winner now, he turned back to his siblings, expression unchanged. With horror, Naruto could only look at Gaara, appalled at the callousness with which he had killed and mutilated Masumi. Beside him, Hinata was trembling a little, experiencing the same horror. Although they were not unfamiliar with killing and death, they were not accustomed to this callous and graphic killing. The worst was Ino, who was crying a little while Anko consoled her. Even the three from Kumo were similar to many other genin. Gaara just stood there, unmoving, while the Suna team cautiously moved away from her. Sarutobi studied the Suna Jinchuriki with a deep frown. The fact that Gaara had killed his opponent didn't bother him all that much because, as shinobi, that is what they did. It was the fact that he had done it so gruesomely, in addition to being so callous and cold-blooded. It also appeared that they were having difficulty controlling him, based on the way his teammates and sensei were behaving around him. It appeared as though Suna didn't give a damn about any global commotion Gaara could start if they allowed someone like that to take the Chunin exams. Sarutobi was concerned about it. The name generator ran through the remaining names, ending with Naruto, Uzumaki and Karui, as Hayate turned their focus back to the exams. After giving that a blink, Naruto rolled his shoulders. He said, "I guess I'm up." Hinata touched his shoulder and nodded. She said, "Good luck, and be careful." As Naruto descended the stairs to the arena floor, Ino and Anko sent their own well wishes. With a soft growl, Karui already had her hand on the hilt of her ninjutsu over her shoulder. Naruto walked up to her and looked her over slowly. Her outfit consisted of a sleeveless top with a slightly ragged collar and arm openings that resembled a short-skirted dress. She was also sporting a long skirt with an open front that let her movement. He saw that beneath the skirt she wore mesh stockings, thigh-high skin, tight boots, and shorts. In addition, she wore an armored vest with a single shoulder strap across her left shoulder and a white forehead protector that covered her hair and forehead in front but left her wild red hair free to flow out behind. Her golden eyes were fixed on him, burning with rage. Watching Karui, Naruto changed into a more prepared stance as Hayate began the match. With his hands poised to grab a kunai or his own ninjutsu, he said, "I have a question, before we begin. Why are you so angry with me? Did I do something to you?" Karui scowled at him. She yelled as she lunged at him, "As if you don't know, we saw you, hanging around with that traitor," swiftly drawing out a kunai. Naruto blocked the blow but saw the kunai actually get deeply gouged by the force of her strike. Leaping backward and hurling it towards her as a diversion, he swiftly transitioned to his own ninjutsu while closely examining her blade. As Naruto blocked it and spun her blade to the side in an attempt to bring his own around in a swift slash, Karui swiftly followed suit and launched a side slash. He lifted one of his armored bracers as she leaned back and brought her sword around her head to slash down at him. He used the bracer to slide her slash off to the side, but unlike his kunai, it held up. He shoved her back and quickly drove his knee up into her stomach, taking the air out of her as he caught her off balance. Karui clutched her stomach and gasped, trying to catch her breath, then shot a furious glance at Naruto, who was brandishing his sword. Now, holding his blade, Naruto was giving a backhand glare. "So what? You trying to get back at her by attacking me or something?" replied Naruto. Karui launched another thrust attack, saying, "I want to make sure she understands what it means to betray Kumo." After parrying the blade, Naruto swung it around and slashed at her neck, cutting a few strands of her hair as she dove under. Naruto just took a step backwards as Karui whirled around and slashed back at him. When Karui shot upward, he saw Naruto pulling out his crossbow with his other hand, the bolt rising into place because of the crossbow's etched emo seal, and the bow blades locking into place as he channeled chakra into it. Without waiting for Karui to react, he fired a quick shot that caused her eyes to widen before she puked into smoke and left a rock in her place. After swiftly sheathing the crossbow, Naruto heard a blade hissing through the atmosphere. He came up to his knees in the roll and raised his sword, using his left hand to support it and deflect Karui's downward blow as he rolled forward, the blade going through where his head had been. He pushed back and stood up again, throwing the blade up and dashing through hand signs for the grand fireball. He let out a loud roar and threw a sizable fireball towards Karui. With a gaping expression, the Kumo Kunoichi threw herself to the side, causing the fireball to explode after smashing into the wall behind her. With a glare, she rolled back onto her feet and raised her own sword, allowing lightning to flow through it. She yelled, "You want to up the ante? Fine," as she swung the blade, sending lightning flying through it and straight in his direction. Naruto barely ducked to the side, scowling as his right sleeve was singed by the lighting. He ducked this time, rolling to the side to escape a third blast of lightning as he saw another one coming at him. Karui charged at him, her sword encircled in lightning, ready for close quarters combat. Naruto had to avoid the blows because he knew he would be shocked and vulnerable to more blows if he let his sword or bracers make contact with that blade. She persisted in attacking him despite his attempts to get closer, her sword arcing like lightning and appearing to be a blur around him. He grabbed a couple of smoke bombs in a desperate attempt to get some breathing room, and when they exploded on the floor, Karui jumped back in shock. After a brief respite, Naruto created multiple shadow clones and stabbed his sword into the ground. With a desperate plan starting to form in his mind, he said, "Distract her. I need a few moments." He closed his eyes and prepared to use the only technique he knew that could help him here, learned after the Nami mission. Not from Anko, but from the only known wind. Wielding Shinobi in Konoha. As the clones shot forward through the smoke. Retrospection Asuma's trench knife was raised by Team 10's sensei, and Naruto cast a sidelong glance at him. He said to himself, "Watch closely," and threw it at a tree. The trench knife embedded itself in the tree, sticking there for a few inches. With a smile on his face, Asuma raised his second trench knife and threw it towards the same tree, its blade distorted into a wreath. After slicing through the first tree and striking the second and third, the trench knife came to a stop at the fourth tree. After blinking in surprise, Naruto smiled at Asuma. "That was incredible, Asuma, sensei." Asuma gave a nod. Yes, it was. Wind chakra is one of the most deadly elements when combined with weapons, as it allows you to make your weapon sharper, reach farther, and pierce deeper than any other element. It is also quite versatile in defense as well, allowing you to block or deflect incoming projectiles and even jutsu. However, it is a very rare element, with only the Suna Shinobi being prevalent in its use. So, you're unlikely to run into another wind user unless you run into a Suna Shinobi. Naruto pointed to the trees Asuma had all but destroyed and said, "So, how'd I do that?" Asuma smiled and started telling Naruto what to do. Flashback comes to an end. Naruto now started directing his chakra into his sword, concentrating on the atmosphere surrounding the blade and trying to control it to his advantage. Little wisps of air started to slowly flow along the blade as Naruto concentrated and ignored the memories his clones were sending him as they vanished. When the first Naruto appeared from the first cloud, and then more, Karui was taken aback. Initially, she thought they were just regular clones, but after the first one nearly cut her arm, she realized they were actually solid clones. She raised her blade, gutting the first that had nearly cut her and scattering it in a cloud of smoke. She then blocked and scattered the next one, sending the clone reeling from the electricity in her sword. She was hit by 2 more crossbow bolts, but she deflected them and destroyed them with a lightning bolt. With a kunai in one hand and a ninjutsu in the other, the 5th clone lunged towards Karui, but she was able to evade his blows and take him out. The 6th clone then turned and began to disperse after being gutted. She glared and pulled out her knife. She cried, "If you're too scared to fight me, then I'll come get you, coward," as she dashed into the smoke and struck an overhead swat with her sword. The 2 genin were exposed when the smoke blew away, producing a sound like thunder that caused everyone to blink. The lighting surrounding Karui's sword was now straining against the air twister encircling Naruto's sword as their swords collided. Now that Karui was upright, Naruto smiled to see the look of shock on his face. "It seems like you weren't prepared for that," he remarked, pushing her aside. With a stumble, Karui raised her sword in time to see Naruto swing at her once more, wind blade striking steel imbued with lightning. Naruto intensified his attack, causing her to jump back as a gouge appeared in her sword and her eyes to widen as the wind actually broke through the lightning. With a swing of her sword, she closed the distance and sent a lightning bolt at him. However, he deflected it with his own sword and then slashed down at her. She leaned back, gasping as the sword's wind tore open the front of her armored vest, letting it dangle slackly off her left shoulder. In an attempt to divert his attention, she hurled it rapidly towards Naruto, but he cut through it and gained the upper hand as their blades collided once more. And once more, her sword broke, the blade being sliced by the wind's cutting blades that encircled Naruto's sword. After knocking Karui back with a foot slam into her stomach, Naruto swung his sword around and pointed it at her neck. The air trembled so close to her skin that she could feel it threatening to sever her neck if he brought the blade any closer. Naruto merely glared at her while keeping his blade ready. He commanded, "Yield." Karui gave him a shaky glance before raising her hand. With I yield, Proctor, she spoke. As he was pronounced the victor, Naruto cancelled the wind around his sword and then carefully sheathed it. Then, to everyone's surprise, he extended his hand to assist her in getting up. He pulled her to her feet while she took it slowly and looked at him in surprise. He whispered to no one else, "Things are not as simple or as black and white as we'd like them to believe. You've got one half of the story, regarding the traitor you wanted to punish by hurting me. I suggest you find out the other half, before you so eagerly rush to what could have been your death," he stated, turning to depart. Staring at his back, confused by his words and slightly enraged at him for trying to defend Yugito's defection, Karui glared. With the remnants of her sword and vest in hand, she stomped up to confront her teammates, who were silently observing either her or her opponent. Karabi could only whistle in her head. "Yuki, the host of Mr. 9, is not a slouch, is he?" he pondered. The Hachibi Biju that was sealed inside of him growled, "No, he isn't. And that was without Kyuubi's help. I shudder to think what he could do with more training, and Kyuubi's aid." While this was going on, Gaara winced and held his head, hearing his mother cry out for the shinobi he had just watched battle. At that, his teammates retreated, appearing concerned. Anko gave Naruto a shoulder pat and smiled. "Well done, Gaki," she remarked. "Especially with the wind chakra." "Naruto, you did amazing," Hinata added, grinning as well. Seeing how well Naruto had performed as well, Sarutobi's expression was one of pride. That this boy, who had been an outsider, had demonstrated such talent and ability along with grace and self-control made him proud. But behind his mask, Kakashi was scowling at the skill that Naruto had shown. Naruto was already becoming more proficient with his wind element, probably because Asuma had been persuaded to teach him. He was a tactical thinker and a skilled bladesman, using a smokescreen to conceal his movements and his clones to divert Karui while he completed his own preparations. He was starting to notice that Naruto was developing almost too quickly. At this rate, there might not be much for Kakashi to teach him even if he were to become his student. As he continued to read his book and consider his options, the next set of names was chosen at random. Sakura watched the names pass by nervously, biting her lip. She was worried about her own match after witnessing what some of the other genin had displayed, not to mention the terrifying sight of Gaara's match. She was still aware of a few shinobi who were obviously stronger than her, though some of them she was unsure of. Sensing that her friend was upset, Ino approached her and gave her a shoulder pat, attracting Sakura's attention. "Hey, don't worry. I'm sure you'll do fine," she replied. Sakura nodded and looked up at the screen, but then she froze, feeling her own body go numb, because that was her name, as opposed to Suna's Tamari. Observing the pink-haired Kunoichi become motionless, Tamari grinned. She flipped over the railing with a flourish, landing softly and grinning as she put her hand on the fan behind her. "Well, you coming pinky or not?" After giving Tamari a stern look, Ino turned back to Sakura. "Sakura, you can do this. Just remain composed and have faith in yourself." "As I do," she remarked. "You got this, Sakura," Kiba said, nodding to Sakura. "Recall that it was you who rescued us in the forest," she uttered. Sakura nodded and stepped forward, but Sasuke stopped her. "Good luck, Sakura," Sasuke whispered to her. Sakura's eyes grew wide, then she nodded, hardening her resolve, and hurriedly made her way downstairs to take her place across from Tamari. With a sly smile, Tamari pulled out her iron battle fan and leaned back against it. "Pinky, I'm feeling good, so I'll tell you this right away. I can't promise your pretty little face will stay that way, so forfeit and save yourself the trouble," she uttered. Even though Sakura shook, she clenched her fists and looked back at Tamari, saying, "If I just gave up, wouldn't I be much of a kunoichi? I might not be the strongest, fastest, or most skilled, but I am still a kunoichi, a ninja of Konoha," she asked quietly, after saying, "I fought to get here. And I won't back down, not when my friends and teammates believe in me." She reached up to undo her forehead protector, moved it from its original position as a hairband, and secured it securely around her forehead. Tamari shrugged. "So, it was your loss. I promise not to kill or cripple you." Sakura slowly slid into her taijutsu stance, fists clenched and ready. "More than my brother would give you," she said as she kicked the fan's base, spinning it in her hands and bringing it into battle position. "Fight!" Hayate gestured to them. He gave an order and stepped back. The trio spread out to divert Tamari's attention as they moved in to attack, but Sakura got things started by running towards her and making 2 clones in the process. Twirling the fan, Tamari ignored 2 Sakuras and jabbed at the third, who sidestepped, with a sly smile on her face. A fun little hint. A proficient user of wind chakra can detect variations in air displacement. Those are useless against me because clones cannot displace air, Temari smirked and lowered her fan to Sakura, who jumped back. "You talk too much," Sakura said, drawing a kunai and getting ready. Sakura suddenly kicked the fan, throwing Temari off balance, as she moved in and punched at Temari, who barely swerved her head out of the way. "Okay," Temari said, giving a quiet growl as she opened the fan. "Then let's dance," she exclaimed, swinging her now fully extended fan at Sakura as chakra flared through it, sending a tremendous gust of wind hurtling Sakura's way. Sakura cried out as she crashed into the wall, collapsing and gasping in agony, and she threw up her arms as the wind struck her and sent her flying back. With a sneer, Temari moved forward, fan ready, while Sakura slowly stood up and drew out a kunai, which she threw at Temari, who easily knocked it away with a small gust of wind before turning her fan around to unleash another fury of wind on Sakura. Sakura rolled to the side with ease, pulling out a smoke bomb, which she threw this time at the ground between her and Temari. Temari smiled and gave it a gust of wind, blowing the smoke away. She let out a cry, but as Sakura stood there with her hands in a hand sign, her eyes widened. The world shook, Sakura disappeared, and Temari found herself in a room of stone and hardened sand. She turned, her eyes bulging with fear at seeing her brother Gaara there, a ruthless expression in his eyes. With sand seeping out of his gourd, he uttered, "Temari, you've proven yourself too worthless to let live. I'm tired of letting your pathetic existence continue." The sand shot towards Temari, who screamed and backed away in fear. Sakura approached Temari with kunai in hand as she stood there, screaming with glazed eyes staring at nothingness. Feeling the drain on her chakra, she let it drop, unable to maintain it anymore, before moving quickly. Sakura could only blink as Temari screamed in horror, trapped in the genjutsu she had used on her. Sakura moved swiftly to get behind Temari, putting the kunai to her throat. Temari screamed and struggled as soon as Sakura grabbed her, looking around wildly, taking a few moments to realize what was happening to her before her eyes narrowed in rage. Sakura said, "Surrender," seeing the smiles on the faces of Ino and her teammates as she caught Temari off guard. Temari just began to growl, letting out a scream of rage as she jerked her head back, smashing Sakura's nose. Sakura bent over, the air driven from her lungs, as Temari now brought her fan around and smashed it into her back, knocking her flat. The pink-haired Kunoichi stumbled back, blood flowing from her nose and tears from her eyes, as Temari whirled, swinging her closed fan against Sakura's stomach. "You fucking bitch. I'll murder you." Hayate stopped Temari just as she was about to smash her fan into Sakura's back of the head. Temari yelled. "That's enough," he said, bending down beside Sakura, who was still lying there, gasping for air, blood still dripping from her mouth and nose, and fumbling weakly to rise but failing. With a quiet nod, Hayate said, "Sakura Haruno can't fight." Hayate declared, "Temari of Suna is the winner," as paramedics hurried to rescue Sakura. Temari slowed slightly as she approached Gaara, moving as far away from him as possible to avoid him, placing Kankuro and her sensei Baki between her and her youngest brother. She glared hatefully at the pink-haired Kunoichi, spitting on the ground near her, before storming way, back towards the railing. "You can't," Anko said, stopping Ino as Sakura's bloody form began to be carried away. All Ino could do was stare in horror. "You'll be eliminated," Anko muttered. "I must help her. I must go see how she is doing," Ino spoke, but Anko persisted in clinging to her. "If she knew she was the reason you forfeited, she would never be able to forgive herself," Anko said. "Wait until your match, then go take care of her." When Ino turned to face her, she nodded slowly and grimly. Her eyes narrowed in hate and rage, and Temari just glared back at her, her fear and rage taking the place of her previous arrogance. Seeing the girl being taken out, Karen, who had been watching, could only stare in horror as she turned to face Naruto, who turned back to face her. I'm going to go see if I can help her," Karen said, running after the medics. While he watched the Suna Kunoichi from his position, Lee also appeared quite upset and furious, clenching his fists. Temari-san's actions were quite unnecessary, he remarked. It was her fate to lose. She should have surrendered when Temari-san gave her the chance. Her defeat and injuries are her own doing for trying to resist fate, Neji said, scowling softly as he leaned against the wall. Guy intervened to stop Lee as he turned to face him, glaring and about to move in his direction. He said, "Neji, you should not speak of your comrades like that, when they tried their hardest," but Neji simply seemed to turn to face where the names were being drawn, obliging to his words. When the names Hinata Mitarashi and Kankuro appeared, his eyes widened a little. Hinata cast a narrowed gaze in Kankuro's direction. She shifted her bracers and said, "I guess it's my turn." And it looks like it's up to me to show these Suna shinobi why you don't screw with Konoha, she stated. Naruto cautioned, don't become too overconfident, Hinata. These shinobi are dangerous, and so far, it seems they're very violent. He's exactly right, Anko remarked gravely, don't underestimate him. With a nod, Hinata turned to face Ino and gave her a gentle prod. Hey, is that right? For Sakura? She inquired, raising her hand. Ino gave her a quick glance before taking it, shouting, for Sakura, she said. With a smile on her face, Hinata leapt over the railing and landed, with Kankuro standing opposite her, holding onto his bundle's strap. With a sly smile, Kankuro removed his bundle and placed it aside. You really want to fight me, little girl? He inquired. You've seen what my brother and sister can do. Do you really think you can beat me? He inquired. Hinata merely observed him, her eyes narrowing a little. She said, you have no idea what I'm capable of, and then grinned. I might just surprise you. Hayate cried out, fight, as Hinata brought her Byakugan to life. Her eyes grew wide, and then she smiled. Grinning, Kankuro prepared himself, holding onto his bundle as though he were going to open it. With haste, Hinata lunged forward and threw a kunai at Kankuro, who sidestepped while holding onto the bundle. As if to cut at Kankuro, Hinata withdrew another kunai and advanced. He lifted his arm to grab her arm, but she spun away and slashed at the bundle, ripping the strap he was holding, then kicked it out of Kankuro's grasp. She turned and jabbed the bundle multiple times as she spun, landing the kunai squarely in Kankuro's chest. A male voice cried out in pain from inside the bundle as Kankuro fell to the ground, appearing as though he had suddenly lost all bone. The first Kankuro started to crack, hardened sand falling off of him, revealing beneath it a wooden puppet. Meanwhile, the wrappings unfurled, revealing a second Kankuro who rose slowly. With a growl, Kankuro massaged his right arm. With his chakra out of balance and his arm feeling numb, he yelled, "What did you do to me?" Hinata simply grinned and slid into her fighting stance. "My name might be Mitarashi, but once upon a time, I was a member of the Hyuga. The Byakugan lets me see a person's chakra, and so I was able to see that you were hiding in the bundle, disguising your puppet. And I could see the chakra strings you had connected to your puppet. So instead of attacking the puppet, and falling into your trap, I struck at you, disabling your chakra points in your right arm there to disrupt your control of your puppet." With a scowl, Kankuro lowered his left arm and began to twitch his fingers. The puppet started to move, with one arm beginning to raise and a blade extending from it, but Hinata cut the chakra strings with her hand imbued with chakra, striking the air. Hinata smirked as the arm came down. She said, "You think I wouldn't see those either?" When Hinata suddenly leapt upon Kankuro, his eyes widened. He was struck with several quick jabs and strikes that caused his body to jerk and spasm before collapsing. Hinata simply smiled at him from below. She patted his forehead as he lay there, scowling at her, and said, "I guess this little girl was the worst opponent you could face, too." After declaring her the victor, Hayate turned to leave her defeated and degraded opponent in the dust. He just glared while two medics placed him on a stretcher and carried him away, trying but failing to get to his feet. Hinata grinned and stepped in with her teammates, while Anko grinned barely at all. She remarked, "Well, that was rather quick." "I guess I was the worst opponent he could have asked for," Hinata remarked, smiling but shrugging her shoulders. Anko nodded and gave a quick flick of her forehead, causing her to yawn. "Next time, don't antagonize your opponent once you've defeated him. It's a great way to earn enemies," she stated. Neji scoffed as he glared at her from nearby. It was evident that Suna Shinobi was extremely weak in order for her to defeat her. Considering his teammates, he had anticipated more, but he was clearly their weak link. It was not very important. As fate would have it, he would deal with her in the next section of the exam. Baki, in the meantime, was scowling at how quickly Kankuro was defeated. He was aware that the boy was still inexperienced in using puppets for combat, but the battle with the Hinata girl had exposed what was arguably one of Suna's biggest vulnerabilities as a puppet shinobi. And that was something they needed to be cautious about in terms of their future plans. The next fighters were soon to be revealed as the random generator started choosing two more names. Kiba turned to face the Auto Genin Dosu and blinked. He scowled at this, recalling him in the forest and the harm his bracer had caused to both him and Akamaru. He looked down at his dog companion, who gave a little whimper upon seeing Dosu getting ready to go down to the arena. He held on to the railing while two sides of him battled it out. Because of the Inuzuka's bond with their canine companions, the more animalistic side of him was urging that he battle this foe and demonstrate his power and value. However, his more rational, human side reasoned that the fight would be fruitless and that the result was almost certain. Thus, when he raised his hand, everyone was taken aback. "I surrender," he uttered, a little hesitantly. "I've already been on the other side of his jutsu. I know what he can do, and that I can't beat him," he said. Sasuke approached him with a scowl. He questioned, "Kiba, are you sure? You could get a strong first blow in, before he could attack you?" Kiba gave a headshake. "No, I'm not going to put Akamaru through a fight with this guy, and if I can't fight with him, I'm handicapping myself. Better to fight another day," he replied. Hayate let out a sigh. "Very well. Kiba Inuzuka forfeits the match. Dosu Kintu wins," he stated. But Dosu didn't appear all that agitated. To be honest, he was glad to be moving forward because it would make his objective more reachable. He gave a small scowl as he cast a quick glance at his sensei, who had made a surprise appearance during Naruto and Karui's match. Now that he knew, Orochimaru had sacrificed all three of them to gauge the strength of his newest potential pawn. Therefore, he had every intention of facing and killing Sasuke in the championship match in order to demonstrate his strength and prevent Orochimaru from selling them like sheep to be slaughtered. Though he couldn't argue with Kiba's logic, Kakashi scowled a little at his forfeit. Given his previous bold and immature behavior, he was aware that Kiba's display of maturity was positive. With a sigh, he accepted that Sasuke had advanced to the next round among his three teammates. Everyone in Konoha, at least, was taken aback by the next pair of fighters, who were Choji Akamichi and Shikamaru Nara. With a glance between the two comrades and teammates, Shikamaru groaned. "Difficult," he remarked, massaging his forehead. "Asuma. Sensei, can I just forfeit too?" he inquired. Asuma gave Shikamaru a scowl. "No, you can't. Unlike Kiba, you don't have a valid reason. You two get down there and fight," he replied. Choji followed Shikamaru down, laughing nervously. He said, Well, at least I know I won't get beaten up too much, as soon as they hit the ground." With a sigh, Shikamaru glanced idly at Choji. "Just do your best, Choji, alright? Show them what you've got." Choji nodded, and Hayate nodded too, glancing at the two of them to make sure they were ready. "Okay, then, let's fight," he exclaimed. Using the jutsu of his clan, the Baika no Jutsu, multi-size expansion, Choji instantly puffed up into a giant ball and then drew his arms, legs, and head inside. He charged towards Shikamaru, shouting, "Here I come, Shikamaru. Nikuden Sensha, human bullet tank." Before making another dodge, Shikamaru ducked to one side, watching as Choji spun around and came back towards him. "You're being troublesome, Choji. I don't like having to move so much," he said. Choji just turned back to face him, and Shikamaru swerved to the side, removing two kunai that had explosive tags on them. He hurled the initial one towards Choji, causing him to veer aside and collide with a wall when it burst. Shikamaru threw the other kunai with explosive tag down before Choji could move back, exploding once more and sending Choji flying back into the wall. Though it didn't do much damage because of his size and bulk, it kept him there when Shikamaru leapt onto Choji's bulk and slammed a smoke bomb down into Choji's shirt's neck hole. As the bomb detonated, he leapt off, causing Choji to return to his original shape and emitting smoke from his shirt while coughing. Shikamaru winced a little and Choji staggered a little, gasping for breath. "I apologize, Choji," he said, collapsing against the wall before Shikamaru used his Kagemane no Jutsu to freeze him. With a sigh, Shikamaru raised his hands and stood up gradually, followed by Choji. Observing his friend, Choji questioned, "What now, Shikamaru?" Shikamaru sighed in exhaustion. As he turned to face Choji, he said, "Well, you can surrender. Or I can knock you out." This was directed at the wall next to his head. Choji sighed in frustration. "Okay, I give up," he stated, appearing dissatisfied at having been eliminated so rapidly. Hayate declared the fight over with a nod, but Shikamaru just let out a quiet sigh. He said, troublesome, not really wanting to go forward but knowing that if he hadn't tried, Asuma and his own mother would have taken it out on him. He gave Choji a back pat after observing how he was feeling. "Hey, come on man, cheer up. You did your best," he replied. "Wasn't that much though," Choji murmured, turning to face Shino as they ascended the stairs. That is, until Choji was stopped by a hand and had to look up to see Ino there. She said, "Hey, don't be down, Choji." She asked Shikamaru, who simply nodded, "You gave your best, and I know Shikamaru gave you his best in return, right?" "Yeah, come on Choji. You really think I wouldn't give you my best, man? We're friends, and you're going to get my best, whether it's sparring or fighting side by side. Just don't make me do much else though," he replied. With a smile, Choji turned back to face Ino, blushing slightly. Thanks Ino.ch. I mean Ino. He blurted out the last word as his blush darkened and he hurried away. Hinata and Naruto smiled as Ino blinked and blushed a little too. Hinata teased, "Ooh, Ino's got a boyfriend," while Ino gave her an arm slug. Meanwhile, Lee was scowling and folded his arms. "Guy. Sensei, my flames or youth are quickly waning," he replied. "I do not like having to wait so long in order to fight," he stated. Guy gave him a shoulder pat. He smiled at Lee, making those around them wince at their antics. "Do not fret, Lee. Your fight will come soon, and your flames will reignite," he said. In order to select the next 2 competitors, the screen started to scroll through the remaining 6 names. Lee simply scowled and averted his gaze until the names were selected. He turned to look back and smiled to see Yoroi Akado versus Rock Lee. Shouting, "Yosh! I knew if I acted disinterested, my name would be chosen." He enthusiastically jumped over the railing. Neji simply leaned against the wall and huffed softly. "The idiot ought to settle down. His mischievous behavior is embarrassing," he remarked, scowling at his Hyuga pupil. Lee grinned on the ground, facing Yoroi, Kabuto's other teammate, who was a full head taller than Lee. Rolling his shoulders and cracking his neck, he prepared for battle. "I don't know which is scarier, kid. Your eyebrows or your fashion sense," he said. With his right hand raised toward his opponent, Lee slid his left arm behind his back and kept grinning. "You will find that those are not what you should fear. Come and I'll show you," said the man. Yoroi charged forward as Hayate opened the fight, readying a right hand lunge, but Lee easily sidestepped it and slammed his shoulder into Yoroi's chest, pushing him back. Lee then took a half step back and unleashed a furious and quick series of punches to Yoroi's midsection. The older, taller genin gave cries and gasped for air, but Lee caught him with a final punch that knocked him back a few feet. Lee just kept grinning as he took up his position again. Naruto smiled while observing. He questioned, "Did you see how fast he punched?" Hinata watched as well, nodding. "Yakumo told me that Lee trains non-stop in taijutsu, pushing himself to extreme limits to be the best," she continued. Ino looked at them and said, "What about ninjutsu, or genjutsu?" Hinata stated, "He can't use either of them. His chakra coils never developed properly enough for him to utilize the amounts of chakra necessary to cast ninjutsu or genjutsu. He is capable of things like tree or water walking, but beyond that is impossible. Hence why he's focused entirely on taijutsu." Yoroi snarled to the ground, his right hand encircled in a ring of chakra. He yelled, "Come here, you freak," and rushed forward, making another hand lunge. Rather than launching another blow like he had before, Lee turned and kicked quickly into Yoroi's chest, sending him flying back and slamming into the wall. With a courteous smile, he said, "I don't see how trying to execute the same attack twice would work. However, if that is your strategy, I encourage you to continue trying your best, in hopes you can give me a good fight." Yoroi stumbled a few steps forward and growled as he moved, trying to lead with a left jab again, but Lee blocked it, punching him in the stomach, hooked his face twice more, and then delivered a powerful uppercut that sent Yoroi flying. Lee assumed his original stance as the elder genin crashed into the earth. Lee scowled as he didn't stand up this time. His question was tinged with frustration at not having had more of a challenge. "The fight is not over, is it?" But Yoroi was not getting up, so Hayate came over to see how he was doing. After realizing he was unconscious, he got up. "Yoroi Akado is unable to fight. Rock Lee wins," he states. After some of the thrilling fights they had seen before his own, Lee scowled at that, acknowledging his victory but feeling a little taken advantage of. Guy gave him a shoulder clap as he joined his team. He grinned and said, "Nice work, Lee." "I appreciate it, Guy. Sensei," he muttered. "I'll admit it though, I was hoping for a better fight, to prove my strength and my flames of youth." Guy gave him a soft shoulder pat. Lee grinned and brightened at the thought. "I understand, Lee, but do not be too upset. You will find a suitable challenger in the finals. Everyone you're facing against will be the best of the best here," he said. The 4 genin who had not yet engaged in combat stared at the screen, tense and nervous as their names appeared one after the other at random, eventually coming to rest on Ino Yamanaka versus Kintsuchi. Ino turned to face her teammates and smiled. "I was getting way too freaked out waiting," she said, reaching down to pat her kusarigama. "Finally, it's my turn." Anko smiled at her with assurance. She remarked, "Well, get down there and make it a clean sweep for Team 8, to which Hinata and Naruto nodded. She said, "Thanks Sensei. I'll be back soon," as she descended the steps. Meanwhile, Kin glared at Ino, knowing that she was a member of the team that had ambushed theirs in an attempt to eliminate Sasuke Uchiha. As Ino took a seat across from her, she moved and placed a few senbon into her hand. With a quick glance between them, Hayate launched into combat. To start the momentum, Kin held up her hand right away, senbon between her fingers, while Ino took out her kusarigama and swung the ball end around. As Kin threw the senbon at Ino, who ducked to avoid them, the weighted ball swung around and shot directly at Kin, who just grinned. After Kin ducked under, Ino swung it around and launched it at Kin from the side, forcing the Ado Kunoichi to duck and try to get closer to Kin. With the chain swinging back and forth to maintain momentum, Ino pursued her. Kin spun around and threw more senbon, trying to use her genjutsu this time. When Ino heard the ringing, she dodged and was about to swing her kusarigama when the dizziness and disorientation hit. She knelt down and groaned lightly. Sensing that her opponent had been exposed, Kin grinned. As she kept ringing the bells, she asked, "What's the matter, Blondie? Not feeling too good? Think you might puke?" Ino became even more confused when she looked up and saw 5 Kin in front of her. "Do you need your mommy to come get you medicine for your sick tummy?" she asked. With a low growl, Ino clutched her kusarigama. She managed to get out, "Fuck you, girl," and then she just about managed to swing her kusarigama down low. Because Ino was so disoriented, Kin was unprepared for this move and could only yell as the chain encircled her right leg before Ino pulled her off her feet. With her vision cleared, Ino leapt forward and struck Kin with her weapon's kama part, barely allowing her to swivel her head to avoid it. But instead of using her weapon, Ino released Kin and struck her in the face with a devastating blow, grabbing her by the scarf around her neck. As Ino raised Kin back up and readied herself to deliver a follow-up blow, Kin's head snapped back. Despite being stunned by the blow, Kin was still able to push Ino off with one foot on her chest and then scramble back up. She shook her head, barely turning to face Ino, when she saw the Yamanaka Kunoichi sweep her left sleeve back to reveal a senbon launcher, which she used in a hurry to fire 5 senbon. 3 of the senbon punctured Kin's right arm as she attempted to sidestep, but she was still a little dazed from the blow to her face. When Ino kicked the weighted ball at Kin, it slammed into her chest. She had dropped her left arm, grabbed her kusarigama, and dragged the chain back to her. The Ado girl with the long hair gave a short oof and vanished, to be replaced by a log, while Ino started looking for Kin right away. She heard a cry above and looked up to see Kin fall, holding 2 senbon in each hand. As Kin hit the ground, Ino rolled to the side, her hands quickly making a hand sign. Shintenshin no Jutsu. Everyone just had to watch as Ino flopped over, unconscious, some looking on in confusion, others anticipating. After a few moments of remaining in a crouched position, Kin slowly stood up and turned to face Ino. With a sly smile, she approached her and slowly raised her senbon needles, seemingly ready to stab Ino while she was unconscious. As Ino appeared to have failed in her attempt to catch Kin in her signature jutsu, Team 8 was on edge and watching in growing horror from the walkway. That is, until Kin simply stopped using her senbon and raised her hand with a shrug. She smirked the entire time and said, "Proctor, I forfeit. I clearly can't win against someone of her skill and ability." When Enko said those words, almost everyone's expression fell flat, and she silently complained about getting her student back for frightening her in such a way. Hayate approached them and simply shook his head. "Ino Yamanaka is the winner by forfeit," he stated. Kin gave him a smile. She gestured with her body, "Would you mind making sure she doesn't do anything until I'm back on my feet? I don't think she's going to be too happy," and then she abruptly sagged over, causing Ino to jerk and open her eyes. After blinking and shaking her head, Kin let out a growl. She yelled, "You little bitch," and was about to punch Ino when Hayate intervened. He gave the order, "Enough. Either seek medical treatment or return to your team now," as Ino stood up and grabbed her kusarigama. Enko gave Ino a sharp glare before turning and stalking away. Ino, on the other hand, just grinned, stowed her weapon, and moved to join her team when Enko gave her a light headshake. "Ooh, what's that for, sensei? Didn't you hear my warning to Hinata? Next time, don't play around like that," she stated. "Just end the match, and don't taunt your foe too much. It's never a good idea to make enemies you don't need to have." With a slight frown, Ino looked down. "I apologize, sensei," she said. Enko simply let out a sigh. She said, "That being said, good work, Ino. Well done," which made him smile a little. In the meantime, Hayate gestured for the final 2 competitors to step down. "Neji Hyuga and Omoi of Kumo. Please take your positions," he stated. As the final 2 genin faced one another, there was a palpable tension in the air. As everyone watched the scene in fear or excitement, Omoi moved slightly, sensing his opponent's icy gaze. When he did, Neji spoke. "It would seem fate is most kind to me this day. It has delivered you into my hands, so that some small measure of justice might be taken against your village for its actions 10 years ago," he continued. With a frown, Omoi held onto the hilt of his katana. "It was your village that killed our ambassador," he replied. "We only demanded justice for his death. Your ambassador broke into the Hyuga mansion and attempted to kidnap a member of the Hyuga clan," Neji replied. "Even if it were not under your Raikage's orders, your village still unjustly called for the head of the one who killed him when you had no right to demand justice for a criminal's death. And because of your village's actions, my father was sacrificed to appease your village's lust for bloodlines." Omoi's eyes grew wide, and Neji gradually smiled. "Yes, I am Neji Hyuga, son of Hisashi Hyuga, the man sacrificed to Kumo so as to prevent you from getting our bloodline, but also to prevent war between the villages. My father was taken from me because of the cowardice of the Hyuga's main family and the duplicity of your village's leader. And now, fate has decreed that I shall have my revenge," he said, slipping into his position of Jukin. When Neji concluded his remarks, Sarutobi scowled and wondered if he should call off this match before it started. He wished to prevent Kumo from having the opportunity to start a global controversy. He couldn't do anything, though, because everyone else had already engaged in combat. With a sigh, he motioned for Hayate to begin the fight, but he also added a second hand sign telling him to keep an eye on the action. With a nod, Hayate turned to face the two. "Start," he commanded. Neji was on Omoi right away, and before Omoi could raise his sword, he ducked inside his guard and activated Byakugan, jabbing at Omoi's right shoulder. The Kumo genin immediately ducked back, but Neji persisted in his attack, throwing blindingly fast jabs and pokes at his opponent. Omoi could only try to sidestep the blows or block them with his sword. Karui snarled at the railing and gripped it tightly. She yelled, "Come on Omoi, stop letting that asshole push you back. Fight," while Kurabi anxiously observed his pupil. When Omoi quickly substituted a piece of debris from a previous match, he appeared behind Neji and struck at him, giving him a break. Without any difficulty, Neji sidestepped the blade and struck Omoi's arm multiple times before the Kumo genin could retreat. He shook his left arm, winced, feeling his chakra shift and his arm go numb for a moment. Neji just maintained his posture and grinned. Then he lunged at Omoi once more. "I told you. Fate has decreed me the victor, to punish your village for what it did," he said. But Omoi was able to raise his sword, so Neji had to avoid the stab. Neji moved to try to disable his arm by striking at his left shoulder. As Neji pursued him, Omoi danced back, sheathing his katana and attempting to run through the hand signals for a jutsu. With success, he extended his right hand. Raiden. Sandabaruto. Lightning style. Thunderbolt. A ball of lightning shot out from his hand, sending multiple streams of electricity flying in Neji's direction. Omoi drew his sword once more and slashed down violently and swiftly as Neji approached, swaying and dodging through the lightning bolts. Neji saw this movement because of his Byakugan, but even this warning was insufficient to allow him to completely avoid the sword as he ducked back. He succeeded in cutting a thin line down the front of his shirt with the blade. Omoi lifted his sword once more, signaling the start of the next battle, while Neji gave him a fierce look. Neji took his time readjusting his stance while they continued to gaze at one another. Eventually, Omoi took the initiative, stepping forward and slapping at Neji's left as the latter leaned back from the sword and hurriedly intervened. Neji struck Omoi 3 times in quick succession with his palms, the third of which caused Omoi to skid backwards, before he coughed up blood before Omoi could react. Nevertheless, Neji persisted, closing in swiftly and trying to hit Omoi once more before hitting a log and Omoi covering for him. When Omoi suddenly materialized behind him and lunged in his direction, his Byakugan alerted him. However, Neji quickly spun, grabbed Omoi's arm, and delivered another palm thrust to his sternum. Neji pulled the katana from Omoi's grasp and tossed it aside, then grinned. Omoi stumbled back. "You fall within my divination's reach," he declared, taking up a new position. Hake Rokuhuion Sho. 8 trigrams, 60. 4 palms. Neji moved quickly, striking Omoi with 2 blows and then 4 more before he could react. He kept hitting Omoi at different places on his body, increasing the number of blows he delivered each time until landing a 6th or 4th blow. With that final blow, Omoi was flung backwards, hitting the ground with such force that his body twitched and he coughed up more blood. Neji simply turned away from his fallen opponent. He said, "Proctor, this match is over," and turned to leave. In order to get the medics to come over and start stabilizing Omoi so they could take him away, Hayate promptly declared the match. Karui gave a fierce growl on the walkway. Karabi stopped her as she was about to jump over the rail, yelling, "You bastard, I'm going to kill you, you hear me? You're dead, you fucker." Neji merely scoffed at her before approaching the walkway to meet up with his teammates. Guy was staring at Neji with a frown. "Neji, you shouldn't have made this bout personal," he responded. "Sensei, I was merely treating my opponent as I would any enemy who would or could potentially kill me. This fight would not have gone any differently if he had been from Suna, or Iwa, or Kiri," Neji calmly said. "In this instance, fate merely allowed me to deliver justice to those who were not punished for their crimes." Neji leaned against the wall, and Guy just scowled. "You will find, Neji, that your view on justice and another person's justice are not the same. Some would call what you did nothing but petty vengeance." Neji uttered, "As you said, Sensei," without seeming to take much notice of what Guy had to say. With a weary sigh, Sarutobi motioned to a Chunin who was standing close by with a box. Hayate looked at the genin that was there as the Chunin got closer to the Hokage. "Will all the victors please come down here for instructions regarding the finals," he responded. The 12 finalists hurried to the arena floor and formed a line in front of the Hokage. He said, "You all did extremely well in these fights, and so congratulations are in order," but it was clear from the way he kept looking at Temari, Neji, and Gaara that he had different ideas about their bouts. The final part of the exam will be held within a month's time for now, which will give you all a chance to train and learn new techniques and abilities to surprise your opponents with. The final exam will be fought in an elimination tournament, where each of you will face one opponent, who you must defeat to reach the next round. Those defeated will be disqualified. However, disqualification does not automatically make you ineligible for promotion, nor does winning the tournament guarantee you your promotion. Instead, you'll be judged on your tactics, fighting style, and your emotions and personality during your matches to determine whether or not you are Chunin material or not. For now though, we will determine the order of the first rounds of fight. Each of you will draw a piece of paper from this box, and reveal the number you receive, he said, as the Chunin moved forward with the box, allowing each of them to draw a number. 5. Sasuke gestured with his slip. 9. Samui uttered in a monotone. 3. Shino mutely said. 6. Gaara uttered, causing a slight tenseness in Sasuke as it implied that Gaara would be facing him. 7. Said Naruto, gesturing with his paper. 11. Temari scowled, clearly not feeling well after the previous game. Hinata said, 1, and gave Naruto a fleeting smile before waving it at him and making him sulk. 8. Dosu said, casting a sidelong glance at Naruto, his most likely rival. Difficult. 10. Shikamaru whispered. With an animated, "Yosh. I have 4. Lee nodded respectfully to Shino while glancing back at him. 12. Ino scowled at Temari, who merely returned her smirk. Neji smirked and said, "And I have 2, turning to face Hinata, who had stopped smiling. As the numbers were noted, Sarutobi nodded. "Very well then. So for the first round of the final exam, the matches will be in this order. Hinata Mitarashi vs Neji Hyuga, Shino Aburame vs Rock Lee, Sasuke Uchiha vs Gaara, Naruto Uzumaki vs Dosu, Samui vs Shikamaru Nara, and Temari vs Ino Yamanaka." With every genin nodding and a quick glance at their confirmed opponent, Sarutobi started to wrap up his remarks. "Remember, this tournament will be fought in front of clients and people from across the elemental nations. You are not just fighting for a promotion to become Chunin, but also to represent your village in front of potential clients. Train hard, and make your villages and fellow shinobi proud." Dismissed, he concluded. Sarutobi sighed quietly, feeling the drama and tension of the last almost hour drain out of him now. The sensei of the various teams moved quickly to their students to escort them from the Forest of Death and begin planning their training regimens for the next month. Observing certain matches had been quite cruel, as the kids engaged in combat to outwit, injure, and in a few instances, even murder one another. And he was aware that some of the games they would see in the finals would be as awful as the ones they had seen today, if not worse. He took out his pipe in silence, lit it, and puffed slowly for a short while before scuttling off. Along with managing the fallout from Orochimaru's appearance, there was a lot of work to be done in order to get ready for the upcoming finals. When the 3 students emerged from Shunshin outside of Training Ground 44, Anko grinned and turned to face them. She ruffled Naruto's hair and fiddled with Hinata's bandana as she asked, "Well, let's all be glad that little adventure is over, You guys have the distinction of not only making it to the finals on your first try, but as a whole team. That makes me so proud." especially since I get to rub it in Hitaki. To Mii's face, she said with an angry grin. Hinata rolled her eyes and remarked, "We're so glad we could help you ruin Kakashi Sensei's day, nay, Chan." Anko gave Hinata a brief smile before becoming serious. "Alright, you all did well in the forest and in your preliminaries, but we do have some work to do. Hinata, Ino, you two can't get cocky like that. It can be dangerous, especially if your opponent is playing possum. Enemies should be defeated fast and efficiently. Understand?" The two kunoichi gave a nod, and Anko went on. "Tomorrow we're going to meet up at Training Ground 7 to work out your training schedules for the next month. I'm going to continue to train all of you, but you are going to be possible opponents against each other, so I'll be working with each of you individually. And I'll be finding extra instructors as well to help further your training," she continued. "So that'll be tomorrow. For today, you've all earned rest, relaxation, and a free meal on me." At that, Hinata and Naruto both smiled, and Ino nodded absently, looking over at the hospital. With a worried look, she said, "Do you think Sakura will be able to receive visitors?" Anko shook her head in response. "Not likely. They'll want to run some tests, make sure the medics at the arena handled her healing and fixed her up, then give her some time to rest. You can check in tomorrow," Anko said while touching Ino's shoulder. "Don't worry, they'll easily fix up whatever damage was done. Sakura will be fine, no matter what." At that, Ino grinned. Her expression darkened. "Thanks, Sensei. You're right. I'll check in with her tomorrow," she said. "And I'll make sure to give that Suna bitch plenty to think about as well in the finals," she grumbled. Anko turned to Hinata after giving her a gentle squeeze on the shoulder in an attempt to console her. "How are you doing? You're fighting a hard battle on your own," she inquired anxiously. She was aware that it would not be simple to defeat her cousin. Hinata inhaled deeply. She balled her fists and said, "To be honest, yeah, I'm worried, but part of me is excited too. It'll be nice to smack the smug look off his face during the finals. And in front of all those people too. Including the clan," she said with a straight face. "They cast me aside, thinking I was worthless. I'll be happy to show them the error of their ways." Hearing the gloom in his friend's voice, Naruto scowled and extended a gentle hand to take hers. She blinked and turned to face him, blushing as she saw what he was doing. She withdrew her hand from his and looked away. Anyways, don't worry about it. I'm not too nervous," she said. "Yeah, well considering how viciously he beat that Kumo Genin, I am," said Anko. "So we'll definitely be working on countering him, if for no other reason than to make sure you survive." Hinata gave a sympathetic nod, and Naruto shrugged. "And my opponent is just a guy who manipulates sound waves with his gauntlet. You get all the exciting fights," he said with a scowl. "That's the way it works, Naruto," their sensei jabbed him in jest. She grinned and said, "For now, let's go get that dinner," as the group made their way to the restaurant. Neji had just walked through the main gate at the Hyuga clan residence when two branch family guards materialized in front of him. "Neji Hyuga, the clan head has requested your presence," one of them said. Neji bowed and said, "Of course," before making his way to the clan chief's office. When he arrived, he knelt by the door, waiting to be called as the outside attendant quietly slid inside to make his presence known. After 5 minutes, the door opened and the Hyuga employee bowed her head. "Hiyashi Sama is all set," she stated, taking a step back. Neji moved slowly into the room, bowing politely at the door, then stepping forward, bending down in front of his uncle, made another bow, this time with his head down. Hiyashi held off on speaking for a short while. He commanded, "Arise Neji, and report," as Hanabi knelt beside him in silence. Neji was sitting at the dais. Neji looked up at his uncle with a raised head. "Hiyashi Sama, I was victorious in my preliminary match against Akumo Genin. He was easily defeated, and I showed him the strength of the Hyuga clan, and the futility of fighting us," he said. He sipped silently from his teacup and said, as was no less expected, "You have done your service to the clan. Who are you facing in the finals?" Neji spoke without pausing. He said, "Hinata Midarashi, the failure," with a cold demeanor. The only response Hiyashi gave was a brief pause, after which he put the teacup down and smoothed out an imaginary crease on his robe. But when Hanabi heard her sister's name, she scowled and shifted in her seat. Hiyashi commanded, "Hanabi, still yourself," and Hanabi froze. But Hiyashi's eyes never strayed from Neji. "I must admit, I'm surprised to hear she was even in the Chunin exams, let alone that she reached the finals. Did her opponent forfeit?" he inquired. "No, Hiyashi Sama. Her opponent was a puppet wielder from Suna. She was able to utilize our bloodline to see through his planned deception and disable his connection to his puppet quite easily," Afterwards she disabled him, Neji said. HMPH. Had she been fighting a shinobi utilizing a more competent style of combat, I might feel a modicum of respect, Hiyashi replied. It matters little. You will destroy her in the finals, understood? He said. Neji said, of course, Hiyashi. Sama. I will fulfill the clan's wishes and ensure the failure understands her place in the world. Hiyashi looked over at Hanabi. You will witness the finals, Hanabi. It'll be important for you to see the fate of those who vainly try to stand against the Hyuga clan. And for you to see how weak your former sister is, thanks to your mother's coddling. And you'll understand how much better off you are under my tutelage. Yes, Hiyashi. Sama, she bowed her head to say. Hiyashi picked up his tea and turned to face Neji. He sipped on his drink and inquired, out of curiosity, who are her teammates and sensei? Her sensei is Anko Mitarashi, the woman who took her in after she was exiled. Her teammates are Ino Yamanaka and Naruto Uzumaki. Both of them also made it to the finals as well. Hearing the latter name, Hiyashi leaned forward and scowled. Uzumaki? He was the boy she was consorting with, he said. And you said both of them made it to the finals as well? Did any other Konoha teams experience such success? No, Hiyashi. Sama. My own teammate Tenten was defeated by Akumo Genin, while 2 of Team 7's members were defeated or forfeited and 1 of Team 10's was defeated. Team 8 was the only full team to advance, Neji said. I see, thank you for this news. You're dismissed. Rest, and resume your training tomorrow. Remember to bring honor to the clan, or suffer our displeasure, he said. Neji bowed, got up, took a step back, turned, and walked away. Hiyashi looked into his tea and scowled, then put it down. As he pulled a scroll to him and began reading it, he said, Hanabi, return to your studies. That is all. Hanabi stood up slowly and stepped back silently. Her stoic face frowned once more as she left the room, taking time to digest what she'd heard. Hinata, her older sister, had advanced to the Chunin exam finals. She was perplexed by this since she had been told non-stop how weak and pitiful her sister was and how much better she was than her previous sister. Nevertheless, she had recently learned of Hinata's success in finishing this difficult and esteemed competition. She was aware that Hinata had only been a genin for 6 months, so it contradicted what she was being told to learn that she had performed well enough to advance to the finals of an exam intended to elevate genin to the next rank. She found this confusion annoying. It brought back memories of the days and weeks following her separation from her mother and her time spent studying and training under her father. The contrast between her father's severe and demanding demeanor and her mother's kind and compassionate remarks had left her feeling bewildered. She paused, shivering, and closed her eyes while leaning against a corner. She recalled spending sleepless evenings sobbing quietly in her room and wondering why no one would cuddle or engage in play with her. She recalled the times she begged to spend time with her Chan, who had always visited her at night after her training was over. Then she stopped crying one night. It didn't assist her or provide a solution to her issues. She stopped as a result. She set aside her confusion and confidently turned her attention to her training. And she was not happy that her certainty was being called into question once more. Standing tall and with steely eyes, she scowled. She would never again be so frail. Resolved, she made her way back to the study where an elder of the clan would be waiting to instruct her on the significance of politics in her position as heiress to the clan. Though the message to Kumo was written with a subtle warning attached, the recently returned Sarutobi was hard at work in the Hokage's office writing out the apology letters to the other villages whose genin had died during the second part of the exam. As he was closing the last one, his secretary peeked in through the open door. Hokage. Sama, a Junin from Kusa is here to see you, she stated. The elderly Hokage said, quietly sitting back, send him in. The man who stepped in was a little short in stature, dressed in the traditional Kusa shinobi green and brown uniform. His shaggy blue hair kept out of his face thanks to a forehead protector. His other eye was dark brown, and one had a scar running across it. He paused in front of the Hokage, appearing irritated. He greeted them roughly and said, My name is Tetsuyo, and I am the Junin of the Kusa Genin team. I must say, Kusa's lessons in etiquette regarding leaders and political figures seem to be lacking, ruefully said Sarutobi, studying the man with a frown while Tetsuyo glared at him. Etiquette is farthest from my mind when I've learned you've kidnapped my only surviving genin, he yelled. They're not abducted, Sarutobi muttered. The elderly Hokage pulled out his pipe, lit it, and leaned back, puffing on the burning tobacco inside. Karen is a guest of Konoha. I merely wished to detain her so that we might have a chance to talk. We were quite astonished when we learned that a member of the Uzumaki clan was alive and well. They were a clan close and dear to Konoha, after all. The Kusa Junin angrily said, "That still doesn't excuse you detaining her," and Sarutobi arched an eyebrow. Tetsuyo froze, his glare turning icy, and Sarutobi said mildly, "It does when she requests to defect to Konoha in order to avoid being exploited and killed like her mother was." "So, she has betrayed her village, and you accept her into your ranks? This will mean the end of any alliance between our villages," he growled. "I never said I accepted," Sarutobi reiterated while taking a drag from his pipe. "In fact, I told her I would do what I could, but never guaranteed her a place in Konoha. However, I did intend to keep her here while we negotiate with Kusa on the subject of your village, perhaps releasing her into our ranks. She is a Kusa genin, and a future valuable member of our medical corps. We will not just simply let her go," Tetsuyo yelled. Sarutobi sighed in frustration. "You seem to be constantly jumping to conclusions. I find that most vexing. Please, do not speak until I have finished speaking," he said with killer intent. Tetsuyo instantly stopped blustering, his glare disappearing as he felt the weight of this elderly but still formidable shinobi. After a while, Sarutobi relaxed and let go. "Good. Now, please listen to me carefully. We do not intend to just take Karen, nor do we expect your village to simply let her go. She is a potential valuable asset, but she means more to my village, given her heritage and her clan's connection to our Senju founders. Which is why I am willing to negotiate with your village on a fair price for her release. Please take this message, and send it to your village. It is my initial offer for Karen's transference here to Konoha, as well as my willingness to negotiate. Your village is welcome to send a representative here to negotiate if they feel the price is not good enough, or they can send along a confirmation by messenger hawk. However, Karen will remain in Konoha custody until negotiations are complete. Do you understand?" he replied. "Why? Yes, Hokage. Sama, the now humble Kusajunin bowed and said, I will deliver your message right away." Sarutobi said in a low voice, "Good. Oh, and also send this letter of apology as well, for the death of Karen's teammates and the other team as well," to which Tetsuyo nodded, bowed, and hastily ran away. Glad that the whole ordeal was over, Sarutobi simply HMPHED while puffing on his pipe. The man had been irrationally angry and haughty, obviously unsure of his own identity. After putting him in his place and pulling the next document over to him, Sarutobi grinned and began to read it. That is, until a gentle wind blew the smoke from his pipe, making him scowl a little. Immediately, he quickly removed a kunai from his sleeve and placed it against the neck of the cloaked person who had just entered through the previously locked window. The figure said, "Sarutobi. Sama, it is good to see you again, Senor," as Sarutobi lowered his kunai. He stowed the kunai and said, "Raphael.san, I see you finally returned," and managed to sneak into my office, as Raphael shifted to the other side of his desk. Raphael sat down and said, "Obviously, not well enough to get past you. I'm sorry for my detour and late return, but I feel that the end results were worth it. Especially since I learned some interesting and surprising news while returning to Konoha." Sarutobi inquired, "What news are you talking about?" as Raphael's expression darkened. Raphael leaned forward and started speaking softly with Sarutobi. "I do not know exactly, but it didn't sound good. I fear that Konoha is in grave danger," he said in a quiet voice. The following morning Anko grinned, watching Hinata finish her breakfast and gather the last of her supplies. She asked Hinata, pretty eager to start training, "Hayamauto?" With a mouthful of cinnamon bun, Hinata nodded. "MMMPHHH. Yeah," she swallowed and managed to finally speak. "Need to start training hard, if I'm going to show everyone what I've got." Anko stated, "That's the attitude to have." As Hinata gave her a stern look, she yelled, "Show everyone what an awesome super sensei I am, so I can get free dango whenever I want." She said, "Huh. Keep thinking that, Anko. Sensei," as she walked toward the door. "I'll see you at the training ground." Anko yelled back, "Ha, I bet I'll beat you there," as she gathered the last of her supplies and placed them in her supply belt. A loud knocking on the door interrupted her as she was about to open it. Anko's cheerful disposition quickly soured, and she growled as she threw open the door. "Damn it, Kakashi, if you're trying." She had not heard this voice in a long time. "Ah, I'm gone for a few months and you're already yelling at other men? K Lastama," the voice said. Anko abruptly stopped and stared in shock as Raphael appeared in front of her, grinning and with his arms extended. She just stared at him in silence for a moment before snarling and hitting him in the arm. She punched him once more as he danced back, massaging his injured shoulder. "You jerk. You've been gone for I don't know how many months, leaving me to deal with all your stupid paperwork, and then just pop up out of the blue unannounced?" she cried. Raphael sheepishly rubbed his shoulder and said, "Your right is as mean as ever I see," while Anko just kept glaring at him. She stormed off, moving past him and locking her house in a huff. "I'm not speaking to you until you've sufficiently apologized for leaving me with that blasted paperwork for so long. And postponing our date too," she yelled. After her, Raphael leapt down and landed behind her. Raphael turned back to Anko, who was frowning. "Anko, be reasonable. I have a good explanation." "Well, good for me, grave for everyone else possibly," Raphael said. With suspicion, she questioned, "How is that good for you?" "Because it won't make you angry at me anymore," smirking, Raphael said, while Anko simply growled before turning and taking off once more. Before he spoke, Raphael followed her with ease to the dango stand, where she got her dango ration for the morning. "I was actually on my way to Konoha a few weeks earlier when I came across a group of shinobi. A mixed group, from 2 different villages," he said. "Otto and Suna." That caught Anko's attention right away because Sakura had said that she thought the Otto genin were related to Orochimaru. Although it hadn't been confirmed yet, it wasn't too difficult to make the connection considering that this was the Otto village's first appearance in a Chunin exam and that it coincided with Orochimaru's appearance. She put aside her anger and became serious. What were they doing? Initially, camping and traveling. That's what made me suspicious. As far as I knew, Suna wasn't allied with any villages outside of Konoha and her other allies. And this Otto village wasn't one of them. So I followed the group, tracking their movements. They were scouting, Anko. Scouting the lay of the land, scouting out passes and roads, scouting out patrol routes. "I think it was a recon group, for a much larger force they're expecting to come through," whispered Raphael. They veered off to the north and kept going till they left Hai no Kuni altogether. Tango was momentarily forgotten as Anko scowled sharply at that. "Orochimaru, the traitorous Sanin, and my former sensei? He's here in Konoha," Anko replied. "Do you think they're connected?" "Hokage Sama thinks so. I was up half the night being debriefed by him and analyzing what information I had gathered. While it's not certain yet, we think there is a chance Orochimaru will stage some sort of operation or strike within the next month. And his target is most likely Konoha," Raphael said quietly. Anko gave a soft growl. "Looks like everyone's trying to take their shot at us this year. Kumo tried to go after Hinata in the second part of the exams. Orochimaru marked the Uchiha boy with his fucking seal. And now Suna and Otto might attack. One disaster after another," she said. Raphael whispered, "Wait, Kumo tried to go after Hinata?" Anko nodded, and Raphael asked in concern. She spoke with a hint of pride, "Oh yeah. Rookie Chunin disguised as genin. Don't worry, Team 8 put short work to them. All 3 made it to the finals as well." After saying, "I'll need to congratulate them," Raphael yawned. "I've barely had any sleep the last 2 days. I need a nice long siesta in a real bed." "Oh, no, I might forgive you for the past few weeks of not being here, but you still left me for months dealing with that paperwork. You're coming to see Naruto and Hinata before you nap," Anko said, grasping his arm. Giving him a break, she continued, "And you're taking me on a very long and expensive date. Tomorrow night," at least giving him a day or 2 to get ready for the date. With a mock dejected sigh, Raphael said, Fine, as you command." The assassin just rolled his eyes and allowed Anko to begin dragging him off while grinning. Jiraiya watched the whole thing from above, sighing with annoyance. Before Anko arrived at the training grounds, he had hoped to catch her by herself so he could speak with her. Though he had intended to the day before, Makoto Uchiha, the head of the Uchiha clan now, had practically insisted on meeting with him to discuss Sasuke's ordeal. He had been forced to describe the seal so Makoto could understand it, and had spent the better part of what remained of the day explaining how Sasuke was safe as long as his will to resist the seal remained strong. By the time he was done, Sarutobi's desire to discuss security issues had taken up all of the time he had left to confront Anko. Jiraiya knew it would be more difficult to persuade Anko to allow him to train Naruto exclusively for the month leading up to the finals with Raphael present. He had to, though. In order to prepare Naruto to face not only the finals but also the other threats in the world, he needed to assess the extent of the damage done to him and the amount of knowledge he would need to impart. Jiraiya decided he had no choice but to follow the two, and as they neared the training grounds, he waited for the crowd to thin out before jumping down in front of them and grinning. He exclaimed, "Ah, Raphael.san, Anko. Chan. Just the two I wanted to meet." He winked and said, "And may I say you look just as beautiful and sexy as ever, Anko. Chan." Anko crossed her arms and scowled as she examined the toad sage in front of her. she said, in a formally courteous but slightly irritated tone. What can I do for you, Jiraiya? Sama? When she was delayed. Jiraiya gave her a smile. I was hoping I could speak to you about your training for your team, or rather, Naruto. He inquired. You're probably stretched a bit thin, what with having 3 genin in the finals, correct? I wouldn't say that entirely, Anko began, repositioning himself on one foot. I'll admit, it'll be tough to give each of them their own unique training for the month, but with the aid of some friends, I think I can manage. Well, I was thinking I could help with that. What do you say to me taking Naruto off your hands completely for this coming month? I'll handle his training by myself, and you can focus on the other 2. They both have some pretty impressive opponents to handle, he said with a cheerful voice. That made Anko scowl and shake her head. No way. If you want to help train him, fine, but I'm not going to just up and abandon my student like that to someone else. I want to show my support to him by helping to train him, she replied. With a sigh, Jiraiya's voice became somewhat beseeching. Be reasonable. Naruto has a lot of potential in Fuinjutsu from what I hear, as well as a very large pool of chakra. I can train him up perfectly to be a powerhouse. The other contestants wouldn't know what hit him, he stated. Raphael pointed to Jiraiya and said, except would you be able to teach him things that work with his fighting style? Naruto has spent many years training to fight a certain way. While he is the most brawler and frontline fighter out of our group, he still tends to fight in a discreet manner, focusing on trying to end his opponents quickly. He's not one for flashy techniques. Jiraiya scowled and slightly lost his tone. Well, we all need to learn how to adapt and fight out of our comfort zones, he stated. It's the mark of a good shinobi, showing adaptability. I can't argue with that, Jiraiya. Sama, but I'm still not going to give up my student. You're welcome to become part of his training, but I won't give him up, Anko said with conviction. With a frustrated sigh, Jiraiya tried a different approach. It's not just about the finals. Naruto is a pretty big target for other villages. And other groups. There's one out there that is planning to target Jinchuriki like Naruto. I want to train him to be able to handle those kinds of people, for his own protection. Surely you can understand that, he continued. Raphael asked, would you be willing then to offer similar training to Yugito-san? She too is a Jinchuriki, and a Konoha shinobi, to which Jiraiya gave him a slight glare. He continued, she's much better trained and experienced, she won't need my guidance, to Anko's snort. Oh sure, not like she could use training and wisdom from one of the Sannin. Or at least be warned by you about a group hunting people like her and Naruto. You only care about Naruto, and are intent on helping him. Why? She raised her eyebrows. Jiraiya scowled and averted her gaze. It's important to me. I can't explain why, except I promised my student I'd look after his legacy, he replied. At that, Anko's eyes narrowed. You're doing this because of the Yondaime. You want to train Naruto because of Minato Namikaze, because he sacrificed himself to seal the Kyuubi into Naruto? When he said, he wanted young Naruto to be seen as a hero, and he wanted me to help Naruto out. So I'm here to do that, Anko practically exploded. Raphael tried to calm her down by placing a hand on her shoulder. Bullshit. If that's the case, where the fuck were you all these years, huh? I didn't see you protecting him on his 6th birthday from drunken villagers. I didn't see you here training him and teaching him the things he should be learning from his parents, she yelled. Glancing at him, she saw that he had his steely gaze locked on Jiraiya. He said in a cool, collected manner, Senor Jiraiya, she raises good questions. I have not seen you do anything to help or train Naruto before today. Why the sudden interest in helping him now? Would it be because of me and our disagreement? Jiraiya turned to face them. His once cheerful and carefree demeanor vanished, and the shinobi took his place. I have had plenty to do keeping the village safe from external threats so that Naruto could grow up in this village. I've been giving Hokage Sama money to ensure that Naruto was taken care of. And I sent him gifts when I was able to on his birthdays, he stated. That still doesn't excuse you for not being here when Uchiha nearly killed him, or when he learned he held the Kyuubi in him, or any of the other times the villagers made his life hell, Anko said passionately, causing Jiraiya to look. You want to help him? Like I said, you can help train him. But I'm not giving you my student, Gamma. Sennin. Now more than ever, I don't trust you alone with him, she growled and then fled. But Raphael remained motionless and silent for a moment before speaking. Jiraiya-san, if you have a problem with me and my allies, please say so, for I am tired of dancing around this issue, he stated. With her scowl back, Jiraiya turned to face Raphael. Fine. You want to hear it? I don't trust you with Naruto. You've taken a young boy and turned him into a trained, cold-blooded killer. He never should have been that. He should have been an innocent young boy, with ideals and innocence and dreams to be a great hero. But you've taken that away and made him something dark and sinister. The Spanish assassin gave Jiraiya a long look before continuing. If you want to blame anyone for stealing away Naruto's innocence and dreams, Jiraiya-san, blame this village. They have ignored and hated a young boy for the crime of having something done to him by another person. A member of the Uchiha clan, seeking to overthrow this village, tried to kill him and forced him to take his first life. Not once did I ever stop Naruto from dreaming, from wanting to be whatever he wanted to be. I told him from the start, in terms he could understand, what he was getting into if he chose to be an assassin. He chose this life because he feels he can do good things for others as part of our order. Jiraiya yelled, "He's a killer. What good can he do coldly killing people?" Raphael simply shook his head as others around them turned to stare at the two. A shinobi is someone who kills people, usually for money. If ordered to, they ruthlessly kill people because someone paid their village to. Assassins kill people, but we do so to protect thousands of other people from death, slavery, and oppression. We do not randomly kill. We kill only those who threaten the freedom and safety of people. If anything, Jiraiya, we kill people for far better reasons than shinobi do. Shinobi like yourself, and what you want Naruto to be, Raphael said with a scowl. If you cannot handle it, you may find yourself unable to connect to Naruto in whatever way you wish to. After leaving, he sighed and sagged a little, leaving Jiraiya standing there with his fists clenched. After a short while, he stood there and followed. Kaseki scowled at the Uchiha clan, watching Sasuke converse with his mother, Kakashi, and a few other Uchiha shinobi while leaning against a tree with her hood up and concealed by its shadow. For the next month, they discussed his training regimen. Makoto didn't want to take a chance on a crazy man like Orochimaru pursuing her son. She insisted that Sasuke receive all of his training inside the boundaries of the Uchiha district, where the other clan members could watch over him and assist with his training during the upcoming month. Though Kakashi was not entirely happy about that, he appeared to be caving in to the demands of his overbearing mother, who also happened to be the clan head. Kaseki looked over at Sasuke and saw him softly pat the curse seal on his shoulder. She was aware that it was still causing him to feel phantom pain. However, Jiraiya had promised them that as long as Sasuke maintained his strength of will and resisted it, the seal would keep it from affecting him. The seal would weaken until it broke the more he gave in and the more he wanted to use it. Closing her eyes, the Uchiha assassin attempted to suppress any guilt that surfaced. She was aware that she was powerless to stop it. She couldn't have been there even if she had wanted to, and she wasn't there to confront Orochimaru. However, she couldn't help but feel bad about Orochimaru marking Sasuke in this way. She believed that she had let Makoto end him down. She shivered and averted her gaze for a brief moment before pulling down her hood and moving toward Makoto while the others vanished alongside Sasuke. She softly asked Makoto, "How is he?" Makoto turned to face Kaseki and then exhaled a worried breath. "He seems fine, but I don't know if it's just his stubbornness or him putting on a brave face for me. Either way, I'm going to worry no matter what." Softly, Kaseki remarked, "You're a mother. That's what they do. My mother is the same way with me every time I leave for a mission, ever since father died. I imagine I'd be the same way, with any children I would have." Makoto heard that and hesitated for a moment. She whispered, "I think you would have been a fantastic mother." "I could still be." Kaseki glanced at her and said in a low voice. "Makoto, I know that the wound for you is still painful, but you must move on. Itachi did what he did, and we cannot change that. We must move forward, or else we can never allow our pain to leave." Makoto only lowered her gaze. "I know, you're right, but I can't help but feel this ache. Knowing what my son did, I wonder if it was my fault somehow. Was I not enough of a good mom? Did I not shield him enough from his father? I hope it wasn't because of me that he's gone, and that you have suffered his loss as well," she said in a soft voice. "The only fault lies with those who pushed Itachi to this. Nothing more," Kaseki said, giving the woman who would have been her mother-in-law a gentle hug. "It was not you, Makoto. I always watched, and sometimes envied Itachi, for having such a caring mother, who was willing to stand up to her husband as you did." Makoto merely grinned and sniffed. "Thank you, Kaseki. You've done so much for me these past few years. It warms my heart so much to see you're still the kind and good person I saw in you as you grew up," she said with a sigh. "You're right, and I should move on. Sasuke needs my attention right now, and he will get it," she remarked as she pulled away from Kaseki's embrace and stood up. "I would ask for your help, but you have your mysterious group, and," she said. "Don't worry, I'll be happy to help Sasuke in any way I can," grinned Kaseki and got to her feet. "It is the least I can do." "Thank you once more," Makoto grinned and said, before leaving Kaseki to lose her smile and cast a sidelong glance at something. When she realized the truth and that Itachi wasn't a monster, she detested lying to Makoto. Which, though, would be worse? Did you think he was a monster who only wanted power, or did you realize that Hokage-sama had ordered him to kill those Uchiha? Kaseki was aware that conflict would arise if the Uchiha clan discovered what had transpired. The incident would have infuriated at least a portion of the clan, maybe a sizable enough portion to pose a threat to the village. Nevertheless, she couldn't help but question if maybe that was what needed to occur. To separate those who would defend Fugaku's acts from those who would see the necessity of acting upon what had occurred. Quietly, she shook her head. She realized that these kinds of thoughts were more the result of a tiny part of her wanting Itachi back. A tiny part of her that still cared for him in spite of everything. She stifled that aspect of herself, understanding that Itachi would never return. Not unless something really bad happens. With a sigh, she made the decision to return home and take a short nap after experiencing a sudden wave of physical and mental exhaustion. Exercise fields. When Anko arrived, the genin of Team 8 were all waiting patiently. She had calmed down a little after speaking with Jiraiya. She smiled to see the three of them get up as soon as she did and come to stand in front of her. Well, good to see you're all here and ready to start training. So first off, we're going to start by analyzing your opponents for the coming matches. Hinata, you're first. Hinata gave a nod, then continued. My opponent is Neji Hyuga, the prodigy of the Hyuga clan. He's a member of the branch family, but he was pushing and training himself hard to become the absolute best he can be back when I was part of the clan. And he still seems to be doing so. He was Rookie of the Year for his graduating class, and he specializes in both the Byakugan and Juken. From what we saw in his match against the Kumo Genin, he is highly proficient. This makes him a taijutsu specialist, who will attempt to engage me in close quarters combat throughout the match. She paused and scowled at this point. What worries me is he has shown skill beyond what I'd expect of the branch family. He utilized a technique that is supposedly a main family-only technique, which I think means either someone is helping him, or he has managed to somehow learn these techniques on his own. This means he might have other surprises under his belt as well when I face him. He also seems to use psychological warfare on his opponents, attempting to break their confidence beforehand with declarations of fate declaring him the winner already. Whether he actually believes or it's just a tactic he employs, I don't know. If I'm going to beat him, I'm going to have to either be better at taijutsu, or keep out of his range and try to cripple or defeat him at a distance, she added. Anko gave that a nod. Alright, we'll see about working on both. Ino, your turn, she replied. Right. My opponent is the Suna Genin Tamari. She employs a giant fan in combat, which I'm betting due to the iron coverings can also double as a melee weapon if she needs to use it. She also is a wielder of futon-based ninjutsu, which makes her highly effective at dispersing long-range attacks made up of weapons or other elemental jutsu, save for Kaiden-based ninjutsu. However, her lack of any other weapons or tools indicate these are her only combat capabilities. I'm betting she largely engages enemies at range, keeping them back with her jutsu. So probably my best bet is to get up close and engage her in taijutsu, probably try to deprive her of that fan. Or distract her and hit her with some poison from behind or the flank when she can't see me, Ino said. Very good. You're right, the main problem will be getting close to her. But, she showed off a big character flaw in her match initially. Remember? Replied Anko. After a brief moment of frowning, Ino snapped her fingers. She was cocky and arrogant. She didn't immediately go for the victory. She showed off and played with Sakura, she stated. If she does the same in our match, I can maybe catch her off guard right from the start. Anko spoke to her and said, very good. Remember that, and try to think of some ways to exploit it, before turning to face Naruto. And your opponent? Dosu of Otto. We've seen him in action, and his jutsu seem to revolve entirely around that gauntlet of his. He utilizes it to manipulate sound waves and air pressure, to either disable or debilitate his voices, or to unleash point-blunt force attacks. However, he has shown no other skill, in taijutsu or other ninjutsu. He doesn't seem to carry any weapons on him either, so much like Tamari, this seems to be his only capability. If I utilize earplugs, I'll be able to negate his ability to try and disable or disorient me, which will force him to utilize his more combat-oriented techniques. If I can get in close and put the pressure on him, that should stop him from being able to fight me effectively. Primarily though, I should focus on taking out his gauntlet, as it would render him next to useless in combat, the gauntlet. I'm glad to see you all put thought into your opponents, and how to beat them, but remember, they are training to grow stronger now, and could gain new techniques over this month. You cannot rely on the information you have now, so be prepared for the unexpected, she reminded them of. Her words were cut short when two figures appeared. You'll also need to consider your opponents in your next matches as well. We'll go over them, and see if we can. One of them was Raphael, who grinned at Naruto and Hinata. He grinned and said, "Well, look at you two. In the finals I hear." He let out a oof and staggered a little as they both yelled, "Raphael! Sensei!" and ran over to embrace him. Before they withdrew, he smiled and gave her a hug back. Naruto simply gave him a beaming, excited smile. Raphael arched an eyebrow at him as he exclaimed, "It's about time you got back. I was afraid you wouldn't see us rise to the top in the finals." Raphael prodded him in the forehead and said, "Is that so? Awfully sure of yourself, aren't you?" Naruto sulked and rubbed that area. Jiraiya, the other figure, frowned slightly and hung back, watching Naruto and Raphael longingly. He stepped forward slowly, clearing his throat a little. "Anko-san?" Anko turned to face him, expressionless. "Yes, Jiraiya. Sama?" she inquired, observing him icily. He tried not to look foolish, met her eyes directly, and spoke with all the strength and confidence he could muster without sounding haughty. "Regarding our earlier conversation, I believe that perhaps your method would be better. If you and Naruto are willing, I will help in his training," he said with confidence. Arms crossed, Anko raised an eyebrow. With a jab at him, she said, "That so? Are you sure I can't find someone more competent to help train Naruto?" She turned her head as Naruto spoke up, impressed that he didn't flinch or react. "Who are you?" he inquired, and Jiraiya smiled, considering the ideal moment. After biting his thumb, he made several hand gestures to call forth a sizable toad, which he now stood atop. Shuffling back and forth on the toad, he yelled, "From the clouds of Kumo to the sands of Suna, enemies tremble and ladies swoon at my name. I am Jiraiya, the mighty game Sennin," before whipping his long ponytail around and striking a dramatic pose. Anko and Raphael just sighing and facepalming, the three genin just stared and blinked at him. It was Hinata who spoke first. "You're Jiraiya Sama, of the Sannin?" she inquired, sounding somewhat amazed but also incredulous at the same time as Jiraiya smiled. He pulled out a copy of a book they were all familiar with and exclaimed, "That's right. I am the master of ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, the slayer of men, the wooer of women, and the author of one of the best-selling series in the world." Glaring at Jiraiya, Ino exclaimed, "That's the pervy book Kakashi Sensei reads." Jiraiya simply scowled and got off the toad. "This is not just a pervy book. This is a work of romantic erotic literature. There is far more in here than just perverseness." All Naruto did was look at him. His question was, "You're a giant pervert, aren't you?" Jiraiya gave him a smile. He said, "Nope. I'm a super pervert," and closed the book. "But do not let that distract you, my dear boy. I understand that you are a budding student of fuinjutsu yourself, are you not? I could give you tips and advice, and help increase your skill if you like. Not to mention I have quite a number of ninjutsu I could pass on to you. I understand you've got an affinity for Kaden?" he inquired. At that, Naruto blinked. "Well yeah, but I tend to avoid ninjutsu. Most of it draws too much attention to me when I'm casting it. I prefer to approach my enemies and defeat them without them seeing me," he replied. Unfazed, Jiraiya carried on with his speech. "Ah, a wise method of defeating your enemies. But will that work in the finals? You'll be forced to face your enemies head on. And do you think you can take all of them on with just stealth?" he inquired. At that, Naruto scowled and opened his mouth to say something, but Raphael cut him off. "He does speak truthfully, Naruto. Sometimes, stealth is not enough. Where I came from, usually you could just escape or use weapons to end the battle then and there, but here, it might be prudent to get some more ninjutsu under your belt. For moments when you need to fight or flee," he stated. At that, Naruto gave a quiet nod. "I guess so," he looked at Anko and said with reluctance. He asked, not observing the slight flinch on Jiraiya's face, "What do you think, Anko Sensei?" At how much he trusted and listened to them. With a simple sigh, Anko crossed her arms and pinched the bridge of her nose. She glared at him, moving slightly so he could see the Ulax by her side and giving him a clear warning, "If he agrees to my earlier condition, as well as 2 more conditions. 1. You will not peep on me and the rest of my team. And 2. You will not turn Naruto into a pervert. Got it?" Jiraiya gave that a nod. Of course. Besides, the path to becoming a super pervert is best learned on one's own," he grinned. Hinata and Ino simply exchanged glances. Silently, Ino questioned, "This is one of the strongest shinobi in Konoha? Maybe being strong turns one into a eccentric?" Hinata muttered, feeling just as disappointed in him as Ino did. Still, if he's strong, I'm sure he'll help Naruto-kun out. Anko turned to face Ino, who replied, I hope so. Though Naruto might try to kill him if he does that goofy dance again. Alright, so on to you two now. Ino, I've talked to my friend Kurenai, who's been busy training the Kurama heiress. She's agreed to take you on and teach you some genjutsu, and how to incorporate it into your fighting style. Should come in handy if you're trying to distract someone. Hinata, unfortunately there aren't many experts in Konoha who can help you outside of me and Raphael.san, which is why I hired someone from outside of Konoha to come help you. They should be arriving tomorrow, and I definitely think they'll be helping you out. I'm also looking into someone skilled in Sweden to help out as well, see if we can't bolster your own ninjutsu a bit, said. And of course, you two. That is, Naruto and Hinata. Will be training with Raphael.san, while all three of you are training with me. Your opponents won't know what hit them by the time the finals come around, she grinned. Anko nodded, and the three genin nodded excitedly as well. Then let's get to it. Let's start off with warm-ups and weapons training. After the three genin fled, Anko turned to Jiraiya right away. I'm warning you, you try anything funny with my student, and I'll show you what made Ibiki. Sama consider me for the T&I department, softly growled she. Knowing he was in hot water after his previous attempt to order Anko and Raphael away from Naruto, Jiraiya just scowled but nodded. Even though he didn't get everything he wanted, he was still spending time with Naruto. If it was feasible, he would try to train him up and try to get him away from the assassins. However, judging by the degree of trust he displayed for Anko and Raphael, it may not be worth the fight. Jiraiya sighed inwardly as he watched Naruto warm up with his teammates, trying to decide how to start. A hotel in Konoha Karui glared down at the metal, growling fiercely as she sharpened her sword. She angrily exclaimed, "Can you believe that asshole? At Samui. The way he tore Omoi apart like that, and acted like he was justified, after what their village did, he should be glad we didn't order that whole cursed clan be turned over for execution." Samui simply listened to her while staring out their hotel's window in silence. I did research into him after we returned yesterday. I understand his particular grudge against us. His father was the one given to use in exchange for the real criminal. He blames Kumo for his father's death, as well as the main family of his clan, she said without emotion. With a growl, Karui saw the whetstone clash with the blade once more, sending sparks flying. Doesn't excuse that fucking bullshit he pulled. Omoi didn't do anything to him, she yelled. Samui glanced at her red-haired country maid and arched an eyebrow. Do you not find it ironic that you say that, yet you readily accepted our plan to injure or kill Naruto Uzumaki because of his association with the traitor? He did nothing to Kumo, did he? She inquired. Kumo just snarled as she slammed her sword into its sheath, her fiery red head. She screamed, "Now you're defending these hugging pieces of crap?" Samui shook her head in response. I am simply not allowing emotion to cloud things, Karui. Our plan was to hurt Yugito through Naruto, even though he did nothing to Kumo. Considering our stance on Neji Hyuga's actions against Omoi, that would be hypocritical of us, but it doesn't stop us from justifying what we did. I'm simply accepting this, instead of allowing my emotions to cloud the issue and cause a greater problem. Emotions are all well and good when you can control them, instead of them controlling you, Karui, Samui said. Had you more control over your emotions, you might be joining me in the finals. Karui merely sighed, bending his arms and lowering his head slightly. Yeah well, maybe that bun-haired girl only lost 'cause she was distracted by your giant fucking chest, she said. Samui looked down at her rather large breasts and scowled, then shrugged. She blushed slightly in embarrassment. If that is the case, then it was an advantage I'll be happy to exploit in the future. Though not if the back pains persist. Samui kept staring out the window while Karui continued to complain about the lucky big-breasted cows. As he was leaving the hospital, Kurabi, the last of the Kumo senseis, paused and looked up at the sun. Omoi was on the mend from the wounds he had sustained from Neji, but it would take some time for him to fully recover. The 8. Sword. Wielding Jinchuriki shook his head, recalling how he had seen his unconscious pupil, spread out on the hospital bed, hooked up to a drip for blood transfusion. Omoi's veins had been ruptured by some of Neji's attacks, so the doctors had to operate to patch them up before hooking him up to blood replacement. Fortunately, it had been fairly easy, and his pupil would make a full recovery. Sensing the Konoha shinobi sent to shadow him, the Hachibi Jinchuriki turned and started walking back to the hotel his team was staying at. Kurabi and his genin were placed under constant observation following the incident involving the other Kumo team, which resulted in the surviving member being imprisoned in their sensei. being banished from Konoha. Kurabi was positive that the only reason his team had escaped expulsion was because they were real genin and had not engaged in any criminal activity or espionage. However, they remained under observation in case something went wrong. When he reached halfway down the alley, Kurabi scowled as he sensed a new presence approaching at the end of it behind him. He turned, not sensing any hostile intent, and saw a hooded figure wearing a long, sleeved black shirt and pants underneath a short, sleeved purple robe. The obviously female figure tipped her hooded head to one side for a brief moment before continuing. Reaching up to lower her hood, Yugito said, "It's been quite some time, hasn't it, Bai?" Kurabi silently shook his head. Without breaking into his typical rap, he remarked, "About 8 or 9 years. Been hard to see you when you betray your home and join another village." "Well, it's tough to be loyal to a village that slaughtered your parents in front of you and try to suppress all memories so you can be their perfect little weapon," Yugito said with no ill intent. "Double so when I come to a village where I'm treated more like a human and a person than my own home." "You know that's not true. No one in Kumo saw you as Matabi. They all saw you as Yugito ni," Kurabi responded. "No, they saw me as Yugito ni, the sword of Kumo. They saw me as the weapon to throw out on the important missions. I wasn't a person, I wasn't a kunoichi. I was a tool. A powerful weapon to be used, just like all the other artifacts and bloodlines the Raikage have hoarded and stolen over the years to try and make Kumo great," Yugito replied. "I left Kumo because I would never be seen as a person. I would just be seen as another toy in the Raikage's personal toy chest of destruction. Big Bro has to keep the village strong. All the Raikage have done that. They've done what they have to so they could protect Kumo," Kurabi attempted to rationalize. With an indication to Konoha, Yugito said, "Look around you, Bai. At this village, Konoha has long since been considered the strongest of the 5 villages. Through every war, every skirmish, they've emerged victorious. They don't harbor weapons and relics. They don't militarize their village and force it to serve the shinobi. This village is more peaceful and happy and diplomatic than any of the other villages, and they still win. Against Kumo, Iwa, Kiri, Suna. What does that tell you, Kurabi?" "Huh? What does that tell you? The shinobi here are better than ours. And it's not because of some fancy relic weapon or harsh environment or by stealing other villages' shinobi and bloodlines. It is because their shinobi are better motivated. They fight for their home, their friends and families and teammates. They don't fight for greed or to hold onto old grudges. They fight for the people around them, to make sure they have a brighter tomorrow." Arms crossed, Kurabi listened to her tirade. He was listening to her with a slight frown. "Kumo has its problems, but you're only seeing the negative. It has some good things too," he stated. "The people have pride, in that they're strengthening the village. They're helping to make it stronger." "Maybe, but it's very hard to see the positive of a village that doesn't let me see those positives," Yugito replied quietly. "I didn't come here to fight you, Kurabi. I have no interest in being your enemy, but I'm letting you know where I stand. If Kumo tries anything against Konoha, I will defend my home with everything I have. This village has given me more than Kumo ever did. And I will fight and die to protect it," she said with determination. After examining her posture and observing the resolve in her gaze, Kurabi sighed. "I really hope Bro ain't fool enough to ever piss you off, Miss Two," he replied. "I get your message, and I understand what you're getting at. But I'm going to fight for my home too, whatever it takes. So I hope you're ready, if we ever meet on the battlefield." Yugito gave a nod. She turned, flicked up her hood, and said, "I'd expect nothing less. Goodbye, Kurabi," appearing to almost completely disappear into the throng of people. With a long sigh, Kurabi leaned against the wall, removed his sunglasses, and gave his nose a gentle rub. Hearing Yugito utter those words had been difficult for Kurabi because a part of her had accepted them. Despite everything positive he could see in Kumo, he thought he was not headed toward true strength. He had heard the gossip about Kumo from shinobi villages and people in other countries. There was never any trustworthiness in their village. A village full of liars and thieves who would stab you in the back or rob you blind with the power of diplomacy. A Kumo shinobi could never be trusted by anyone, with the exception of their own people in Kaminari no Kuni. However, he had a secret that Kumo did what it needed to in order to endure, to keep their people safe. His village had its way, and Konoha had theirs. And he would defend and serve his home regardless of how much he disagreed with it. After all that Big Brother had done for him, this was the very least he owed him. After putting his glasses back on, he turned to leave the alleyway and head to meet his genin to inquire about Omoi's progress. If nothing else, that would be some encouraging news to raise their spirits, and hopefully his as well. Unknown place. After discreetly reading the report that his associate had given him outside of Konoha, Danzo put it down. He silently observed as one of his numerous root operatives materialized while tapping his cane on the ground. The root operative just vanished to carry out his orders, saying, "I want all commanders to report for briefing immediately, and begin preparations to seal up all our facility entrances." Danzo sat silently at his desk, thinking about what was about to happen. He had been planning for years to bring Konoha to its knees because he knew that Sarutobi's weakness would be the cause of it. A storm was coming that would blow away all of Sarutobi's valuable leaves and branches, and when it did, the root would show that the tree of Konoha was still strong, ready to blossom into the powerful military force the village was always meant to be. He glanced up at the 12 masked people who had silently entered his office before saying, "You will direct all root operatives to withdraw to our main facility on the day of the Chunin exam finals. After that, we'll shut off the entrances and wait out the approaching storm. We shall rise and claim our rightful place as the leaders and protectors of this village, once the fire and dust have subsided. Proceed to share the news. Make sure everything is done in complete secrecy," he gave the order. Every single root agent nodded and vanished, leaving Danzo to sit there in his office, vowing to protect and save Konoha, even from itself, since only he was aware of the reality of the shinobi world and the only one who could bring Konoha back. With great care, Hinata sighted down an arrow knocked on her bowstring, then exhaled slowly and released the arrow. She drew another arrow fast from the storage seal on the grip and shot it as fast as she could after the first, doing this 3 times in quick succession to show her new extra sensei, whom Enko had hired to train her, how to use a bow. The hunter they had assisted on their first C-rank mission, Ryushi, nodded in agreement as he observed Hinata's accuracy and observed the grouping of her arrows with a practiced eye. "Well, you've got accuracy and a fair amount of speed. Both good traits for an archer who finds themselves in a fast-paced battle. But what I'm going to be teaching you will be pushing that to the next level," he said. "I'm going to teach you how to shoot on the move and to fight in close quarters with your bow." Hinata went to get her arrows and gave a sympathetic nod. She said to him, "Like how you shoot your bow?" Drawing his own bow and up to 4 arrows, he said, "To a degree. I can't teach you everything I know, not in a month, but I can teach you the start of what I know. And given your profession as a shinobi, I think firing on the move will prove very useful to you," he added. He said, "Watch me," holding the bow and arrows in one hand while pulling back an arrow with the other. He started running to one side, drawing and firing the first arrow, then quickly firing the others as Hinata watched. With a sudden spin, he pulled more arrows from his quiver, dropped to one knee, fired the first one, got back up, and fired quickly as he moved in the opposite direction once more. After completing his demonstration, he nodded in the direction of the human-shaped target, where all of the important points, marked and unmarked, had been precisely struck by his arrows. As he put his bow back around his shoulders, Hinata could only look at him in wonder. "Your first step will be learning to fire accurately while walking. When I see you're capable of getting consistent accurate shots over and over again, we'll move on up to running. Afterwards, we'll see what time we have left to train you in," he said, with her nodding her head in agreement. "Now, let's begin." Kurenai was at another training ground, beginning her own lesson with Ino. Genjutsu is perhaps the most refined and definitely the most subtle of the 3 major branches of shinobi arts, she stated to the Yamanaka. It requires cunning and deception, as well as a strategic mind. You need to be able to hide your casting to fool your opponents into believing your illusion is real. And so that way, they are less likely to realize the truth and break it before you make your attack. But you also must know the right moments to utilize genjutsu, as simply throwing them out at random will not be as effective as casting one at the right moment. A single genjutsu can be more devastating than a dozen ninjutsu, if used properly. Kurenai proceeded as Ino nodded. She smiled as she vanished from view, and Ino found herself bound and restrained against a tree as Kurenai emerged from the trunk with a kunai in hand. Considering your weapons, especially with Anko having you learn how to use poison effectively, you'll want to utilize genjutsu designed to either immobilize or distract your enemies long enough for you to deliver the poison without them realizing it, she said. What do you think? All Ino could do was stare in shock as Kurenai stopped the genjutsu and turned back to face her. I didn't even see you cast it. That's because, before the lesson even started, I cast a genjutsu on you, grinned Kurenai, causing Ino to startle. You didn't expect it, and so you didn't see it until I made it obvious. This whole time, you were in my thrall, and if I were an enemy, I could have ended you. That is the power of genjutsu when it is utilized properly. Now let's go over a few different genjutsu for you to start learning. With great anticipation, Ino nodded and approached Kurenai, taking out a genjutsu instruction scroll. In a third training area, Jiraiya was closely observing Naruto as he displayed his proficiency with a variety of weapons in addition to his taijutsu. Alright Gaki, so you're good with your fists and with your weapons. We don't need to worry about that. How good is your chakra control? Sheathing his ninjutsu on his back, Naruto broke his stance. I've got both tree walking and water walking down pretty good, though I can still work on improving both. My control is fairly good overall, but the problem is I have a hard time getting really fine control over my chakra, due both to my Uzumaki genetics and the Kyuubi, he said, knowing that Jiraiya was aware of his and that of his family. Jiraiya gave that a nod. Uzumaki chakra is among some of the most potent and powerful in the world. It ties in with their incredible strong life forces, and what made them some of the most feared combatants on the field, when they're properly trained. But Kyuubi's chakra leaking into your own would make it even harder to control your chakra. Still, it sounds like you've got a good foundation so far on that front. How about your ninjutsu arsenal? I know summoning jutsu as well. I've got Kage Bunshin down pretty well, along with a couple Kaden ninjutsu and the fundamentals of food and manipulation. Haven't gotten any ninjutsu there yet, Naruto remarked, making Jiraiya squint and mentally scowl at that last bit. He questioned Naruto, you know summoning jutsu already? Do you have a contract? With a simple nod, Naruto withdrew the summoning scroll from a pouch. Raphael. Sensei found it during our mission to Nami, and gave it to Anko. Sensei. She offered it to Hinata and I took it. They're called Fennec Foxes, and they're highly skilled at information and intelligence gathering, as well as some being combat capable, he said while raising the scroll. Jiraiya accepted it and studied the scroll. This must be a very old contract. I don't think I've ever heard of them, he said softly, continuing to scowl in his head. In addition to strengthening their relationship, he had hoped that Naruto would sign the Toad contract in the manner he had, since it would enable the boy to learn a formidable and age-old form of jutsu that only a select few could master. He was aware, though, that most summoning contracts were legally binding and that the summons prevented their summoners from entering into new agreements. Nonetheless, he could discuss the idea with the Toads and hope that they would be receptive, and maybe these Fennec Foxes would be too. He smiled and returned the contract to Naruto. Well, if you've already got summoning down, I guess I won't need to teach you that. So I guess I'll need to teach you something else. I know. You've told me you've been in contact with Kyuubi? With that, Naruto nodded and put his contract away. For a few years now. It happened after an accident during a sparring lesson in the academy. The seal was weakened slightly, enough for me to be able to contact Kyuubi. Since then, I've been trying to establish a dialogue with him, at the suggestion of Yugito-san, he stated. I'm hoping maybe to earn his trust so that we can work together, if the need arises. Jiraiya asked, and how is that going so far? He paused to think of the name of the first Uzumaki in which Kyuubi had been sealed. It's tough. Kyuubi has a lot of anger and mistrust towards humans. He seems especially angry after being sealed away in my mom, and Mito Uzumaki, he said. At that, Jiraiya scowled and leaned back against a tree. It was necessary to do so, in order to protect the village, he stated. Naruto gave a shrug. I guess I could understand when it was first done, because he was used to attack the Shodai Hokage. But what about afterwards? Shouldn't he have been freed then, if he had calmed down enough to not want to attack Konoha? Gaki, if we had let it go back then, even if it didn't destroy us, Konoha would be left without a Jinchuriki to stop the other villages' Jinchuriki if they came after us. And even if they didn't, if we let Kyuubi free they'd try to seal it away to make another Jinchuriki. They'd fail unless they had an Uzumaki, but still. It's better if it's kept sealed away, for everyone, Jiraiya continued. At that, Naruto crossed his arms and scowled. Silently, he questioned, the ends justify the means? Many people have used that in history to justify all kinds of atrocities and horrors. I have a hard time agreeing with any means where other people have to suffer for the betterment of your own people or village. Not unless they were the ones who started it, and even then it depends on how far you go. With a groan, Jiraiya covered his face with his hand. He tried to steer clear of any arguments or debates that would jeopardize his chances of developing a close relationship with Naruto. Look, this isn't the time for a debate. I was thinking that we could practice you utilizing Kyuubi's chakra, so you can get more and more used to it. It'll be a powerful advantage when you're dealing with more powerful shinobi. He looked at Naruto after lowering his hand from his face. Have you tried using his chakra yet? Naruto gave a head shake. Not after the initial accident. His chakra caused me a fair amount of pain. And since then, I've mostly focused on talking to Kyuubi more than anything, trying to establish a dialogue or maybe some sort of working relationship. Jiraiya moved to him and said, Well, that's what I'd like to focus on this month, if possible. Working on being able to use Kyuubi's chakra. Why don't you talk to Kyuubi, see if he's willing to help? With a nod, the blonde Jinchuriki closed his eyes and entered his own mental realm. He looked up as he entered the assassin warehouse and proceeded to the area enclosed by the seal's bars. He could see Kyuubi relaxing on the opposite side, and in the distance, the smoking ruins of a city. The enormous fox approached and spoke without even looking at him. I heard what was going on. You're here to ask for my chakra, he replied. Naruto remained well away from the bars and gave a quiet nod. You're right, I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to lend me some of your chakra, and maybe help me learn how to use it. The fox said, opening an eye and giving him a scornful glance. And why should I? Why should I give you my chakra, or help you in any way? You're the one who keeps me imprisoned. Why should I help my jailer? After giving a thoughtful lip bite, Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I can't think of a single reason why you should. Sure, I can think of reasons why I want you to, but not any reason why you should want to. The Kyuubi silently observed him for a short while. How very interesting. Not only are you honest with me, but you continue to not demand the chakra from me. This is a change from your predecessors. Mito simply forced the chakra out of me with her seal, and your mother demanded and blustered at first, then forcibly took it later. I'll admit, you have piqued my interest. Very well, young brat, I'll be willing to lend you my chakra and advice. But only if you agree to one condition. With caution, Naruto asked, what is your condition? If you never demand my chakra from me, I will continue to lend it to you, as well as whatever instruction and aid I feel inclined to give. If you demand it of me or try to forcibly take it, and thus prove you're worse than your mother and ancestor by being a hypocrite, I will deny you the use of my chakra for the rest of our days together, he said, smirking when he noticed Naruto when his mother was criticized. Although Naruto disagreed with Kyuubi's remarks, he had to concede that his mother was quite capable of acting in that manner. He was unaware of the full extent of her interactions with the enormous Biju. He nodded, letting go of his breath and looking up at Kyuubi. I accept your terms, he said, extending his hand and approaching. Kyuubi gave him a long look before snorting. I doubt we'll ever get along enough for me to touch you without killing you, he said, resuming his lying position. Do not bother, ape. Dropping his hand, Naruto turned and vanished from sight. Opening his eyes, Naruto faced Jiraiya in the physical world. He swiftly added, he's agreed to help me, as long as I follow a condition he set. Nothing dangerous or worrisome, realizing Jiraiya was about to speak. The Sannin simply shut his mouth and shrugged. Alright, so does he have any advice on how to draw upon his chakra and not your own? The said fox started talking inside Naruto's head. Due to the weakened nature of the seal, some of my chakra has slowly been leaking into your own. I can use this to push a bit more chakra out, which you can draw upon. Otherwise, you won't be able to draw upon it without forcibly doing so, which would violate our condition. I will start feeding you some now, and you can learn how to feel it and start adapting to it. Naruto felt warmth rising from his stomach and permeating the rest of his body before he could reply. He tried to pull on that warmth with all of his might, but as he did, he shuddered and felt a red chakra aura slowly envelop his body. The aura wavered and fluctuated around him. An ache swept through his body as well, and he hunched over a little. Jiraiya scowled as he observed this, realizing that Naruto was clearly uncomfortable as the young genin slowly straightened up and began to breathe heavily. Trying to get used to the feeling, he said, it's not as bad as it was when I was younger. As Jiraiya spoke, Naruto nodded and rolled his shoulders, trying to get comfortable. Well still, let's not push things too far. If it starts feeling too painful, let it go. We'll work on building a tolerance over time, Jiraiya said. I'll look into other things to teach you besides working on your ability to use the Kyuubi's chakra, and we'll work on all that during the month. With a nod, Naruto shifted and moved, sensing the energy coursing through him. I appreciate Kyuubi, he thought to himself as he started to get used to the discomfort and feel of Kyuubi's chakra. Anko, who was observing from the tree line, scowled a little when he saw Naruto using Kyuubi's chakra, clearly with Jiraiya's help. She didn't like the thought of Naruto succeeding without Yugito's help or having a stronger bond with Kyuubi. However, it appeared that Jiraiya was moving forward, attempting to acclimate Naruto to the chakra of the Biju. All she could hope was that he didn't push him too hard and taught him something else instead. Quietly shaking her head, she turned away and walked away. As usual, her students had begun the day by studying under her guidance, practicing, and sparring. They then divided up to work with their individual trainers. After they finished that, she would go get Hinata for some on-1 training, while Naruto trained with Raphael and Ino with her father. She smiled a little at the thought of the assassin, recalling that this was the night she had been waiting for since the mission to Nami. Though she was excited about it, she was also a little nervous about it. She was afraid of ruining things because, in the best case scenario, this date could make things very awkward between them. In the worst case, they were close friends and co-workers. She was looking forward to it, though, because she liked spending time with him. She sighed and shoved the date farther from her thoughts. She had to put her date worries on hold for the time being and concentrate on her intended training for Hinata. Raphael set aside another report from one of his contacts at the assassin headquarters. Anko's training and work with Team 8 had caused the reports to backlog somewhat during her tenure. He sighed as he finished and took a quick look at the other reports he still needed to review. Apart from the most recent report from Suna, which stated that Suna's shinobi were mobilizing in large numbers, there was, for the most part, nothing noteworthy to be concerned about. Combined with his personal experience with the Suna and Otto shinobi, it undoubtedly caused him some concern. He pulled out a few more reports that he thought related to that case and put them all in one pile so he could review them all at once and complete the connections. After finishing that, he sighed and reclined in his desk chair while glancing at a wall-mounted clock. He shifted slightly nervously, his mind wandering to his later, that evening date with Anko. During his stay in Konoha, he had to acclimate to the distinct social interactions between people that were not present in Rome. And their approach to courtship was one of the main contrasts. Even when a genuine relationship rather than a brief fling or dalliance was the goal, it was much more casual here, with the exception of nobles. All Raphael could hope for was that the lessons he had learned from many people, including Muki and Amayuri during their time together, would help him at least avoid looking foolish. In particular, this date could strengthen or weaken his already intimate friendship with Anko. He got up and stretched, thinking that he would try to help reduce his anxiety by getting some exercise in before he had to go help train Naruto. He moved to one of the training dummies, unsheathed his sword, and assumed the combat stance, losing himself in an automatic dance of thrusts, parries, and cuts. That night after his first training day for the finals, Naruto tried not to sigh as he made his way back home. His entire body continued to ache a little from being exposed to Kyuubi's chakra, but that was before he had to go train taijutsu and kenjutsu with Raphael. After a long day of mental and physical training, he had decided to stay and train a little bit more on his own, so he was looking forward to a nice bath to ease his muscles and rid himself of the dirt and sweat. He blinked as he turned a corner and saw someone he didn't expect waiting for him. He questioned, "Kiba? What are you doing here?" The Inuzuka boy pushed himself away from the wall he had been leaning against and stood there looking a little uneasy. As Naruto approached, he appeared incapable of fixing his gaze on him. Instead, it was constantly shifting to other objects. Standing a few feet away from Naruto, he finally said, I needed to talk to you." Naruto looked at the boy in front of him and said, "Okay, what about?" He was cautious of him because Kiba had tried his hardest to both challenge and assault Naruto when he could, as well as to taunt and harass him. But as he stood in front of Naruto, he appeared completely uninterested in that. Kiba attempted to speak while inhaling deeply. Naruto blinked at Kiba's final words. "Look, it's about. Okay, look man. This is about how I've been treating you. I was wrong, okay? I'm sorry. I've been treating you pretty crappy for years here now, and I'm sorry for it." He opened his mouth to reply, but the feral boy spoke quickly again. "I mean, part of it was my instincts screaming at me to beat you because you were a challenge, a threat to me. I'm the son of the clan head, you know? I need to be strong and tough, an alpha. And you beating me, it made you a threat to that. But even still, I should have had better control over my instincts. So I'm sorry, alright?" "Alright, I understand. Kiba, it's okay," Naruto remarked, a little taken aback by Kiba's apology. Though it didn't justify it, he could sort of understand why Kiba reacted the way he did. Naruto chose to investigate the reason behind the abrupt apology because he was a little curious. "What made you suddenly decide to apologize to me?" he inquired. Kiba shuffled a little before turning to face Naruto. "You saved my life. I mean, your clones did twice, and you did once, going after the Autogenin like that. So, that's why," Kiba told him. "I guess, coming that close to death, and seeing you save me, even seeing your clones sacrifice themselves for me and my team, it kind of made me realize how shitty I've been. That's why I want to apologize to you. And hope we can at least be good comrades," he said, extending his hand. Naruto approached slowly and accepted it. Shaking the Inuzuka's hand, Naruto remarked, "We were always comrades, Kiba, no matter what." Kiba smiled weakly. He said, "That's good to know," and then his smile got cockier. "Don't think I won't stop challenging you though. I still got my reputation to worry about." Naruto gave a small laugh. I think I could always use a good sparring partner, he responded, stepping away from Kiba. I wouldn't go challenging Hinata-chan again though, if I were you. She's still angry about your last spar. At that, Kiba winced a little. He rubbed his arm, recalling the pain from their previous altercation, and said, yeah, I think I need to apologize to her too. And then probably see a doctor afterwards when she's done accepting my apology. As he began to back away, he said, good luck in the finals. Naruto said, thanks Kiba. As he watched the boy walk away, feeling a little lighter now, he turned back towards his apartment with a slight smile. Anko, in the meantime, checked her appearance and makeup in the mirror to make sure everything was alright. She had dressed casually for their first date, wearing a knee-length skirt, boots, and a tank top under a short jacket that hung just below her breasts, per Raphael's request. Her hair was styled in her signature high ponytail, with a subtle application of light lipstick and eyeshadow. Since she had never worn makeup before, she had to borrow from Kurenai for the last two and ask her assistance in applying the appropriate amount. She turned her head away from the mirror just as Hinata emerged from the restroom, her hair wrapped in a towel and her clothes wrapped in a bathrobe. She grinned, taking in the sight of her sensei, guardian, and big sister. You look fantastic, she grinned. With her jacket adjusted, Anko said, thank you. I haven't really had any need for date clothes before. Hope he likes this. Hinata teased, ooh, don't tell me Anko Midarashi is nervous about something, while Anko laughed and shoved her. A knock on the door at that precise moment made Anko start and tremble to check herself once more before going to the door. She inhaled deeply before opening it and grinning to see her date. Standing on the opposite side were Raphael, dressed in slacks, a casual blazer, and a button-down shirt with a few buttons undone at the top. He had his hair styled and combed, with a small ponytail pulled back at the nape of his neck. He smiled and held out to her a bouquet of flowers, some lilacs, some orchids, and some lilies. For you, he said, glancing over her slowly before returning his gaze to her face. Anko accepted them with a smile. She sniffed and said, never figured you for the bouquet-giving type. Just let me put these in water, and we'll get going. When she nodded to him and stopped in the living room, Raphael nodded and followed her. To be honest, giving a bouquet is actually one of the more basic things someone in my world who was going courting was expected to do. I simply thought you'd enjoy it, he stated. She said, wow, that really sounds old-fashioned, and placed the flowers in a glass with some water. Though to be fair, I think the daimyo and other nobles still do that too. So, what are we doing for our date? Well, I know you probably were expected some whole big deal, but I figured it'd be better to start off simple, and, well, we'll see about the next few dates, he laughed. But for tonight, we're going to get some dinner, see if there are any good movies at the theater, and then I thought end the night with a nice walk. If all goes well, he laughed. She stepped back to face him and said, sounds good to me. I never was one for really snooty restaurants anyways, before yelling. Hinata, I'm going out. Make sure you get lots of rest for tomorrow. With a yell of confirmation from Hinata, Anko turned to face Raphael and smiled. Shall we? Raphael grinned and grasped her hand. He led her out of the apartment and said, we shall, pausing so she could lock the door. Hope you've got plenty of room for dinner. Anko merely gave a mock gasp and gave him a small shove. I hope you're not making a comment about my weight, good sir, she replied. Not at all, my dear, Raphael chuckled, though I do enjoy a woman with a healthy appetite. As they made their way to the restaurant Raphael had selected for dinner, Anko laughed. With a smile, she said, if they've got dango, I definitely will, excited for the evening. In another place, Gaara was sitting on the apartment building's roof with his team, gazing up at the moon. Mother was usually silent when he was killing someone, so this was one of the few occasions he was not talking. Mother had become even more terrible since coming to Konoha, as a result of sensing the chakras of two other young people. Above all, she had been yelling for their blood, desiring their death. All that had kept her at bay had been the prospect of blood from subsequent fights in the forest, the preliminary round, and the impending finals. But in this quiet moment, he couldn't help but wonder why they weren't like him. He had witnessed them embracing friendships despite the fact that they were Jinchuriki, just like him. The woman even had a boyfriend. How could their concern for others weaken them? The powerful only thought about themselves. He had discovered that long ago, and everything he had encountered had led him to believe it to be true. He did not fight to ensure the happiness or well-being of others. Rather, he fought only to ensure his own existence by taking the lives of others. He pushed the idea from his mind. It was not really important to him. In the end, he would kill them both to appease Mother when the time came. The only person who looked out for him and shielded him was she. He looked up at the moon and closed his eyes for a few seconds, feeling sick to his stomach as he thought about that day. When Raphael and Anko started walking back towards their apartment building, it was already past midnight. They had visited the movie theater to check out the offerings after enjoying a satisfying dinner at the restaurant. When Anko took Raphael to see his first movie a few years ago, he was pretty shocked because he could never have imagined that a story could be recorded and then shown on such a big screen, as if it were actually happening right then and there. The technology in this world seemed, in some cases, both superior and inferior to that of the world he had left behind, as it amazed him. But tonight, he had been enjoying the action comedy that was on. It was about two shinobi in a big city who had to cooperate to solve a crime. It was funny because their relationship was dysfunctional. One was a shinobi who followed the rules religiously, while the other was a rogue who disobeyed everyone to achieve his goals. As their date came to an end, the two were strolling together and taking advantage of a quiet moment to chat and spend time together. Now, as the civilian areas of Konoha had grown throughout the years, they were passing through one of the small parks, a former training ground turned recreational area. Anko paused and rested against the railing of the bridge they were crossing. "It's been a great night," she remarked, closing her eyes to relish the refreshing night breeze. Grinning, Raphael leaned against the railing beside her. "Yes, and it's quite a lovely moon out tonight," he remarked, casting his gaze upward at the setting moon. "There were times where I'd simply sit on the rooftop of our hideout in Rome and watch the moon, enjoying the relative peacefulness of the night." Anko grinned subtly as she turned to face the moon. "Oh, any deep, contemplative thoughts, or was it just moon and stargazing?" he replied. With closed eyes, Raphael exhaled a contented sigh, remembering that moment. He said quietly, "It varied, from time to time, after giving it some thought. Some nights, I simply sat back and watched the moon. Other times, I used the quiet to deal with my thoughts or troubles. I do the same here some nights when I'm still at the warehouse." Anko turned to face him and exchanged a few words. "Do you ever miss it? Your original home, your world?" After a few moments of silence, the assassin spoke with a little hunched-over posture. "When I first came here, I'd say that I definitely missed my home. I was in a strange new world, surrounded by people I knew nothing about, who could do things many in my world would consider unholy or demonic. The only thing that stopped me from doing my best to escape was the simple fact that I had nowhere else to go. But now, I still miss some of my friends, my fellow assassins back in Rome. But I have made new friends here. There is much here to make me forget about my worries and sorrows." Anko smiled and gave him a gentle prod in the side. "Good," she said. She teased, "I'd like to think I had some small part in helping you feel that way." Raising his head to face her, Raphael took a gentle hold of one of her hands and caused her to blink. "The truth is, Anko, you're the one who's done the most for me," he said with a smile. "Ever since that day you started mentoring me, it has been you that has helped me to feel more at home here. And I can't ever truly repay you for that." With a slight flush to her cheeks, Anko could only stare at him in shock while Raphael held her hand tenderly and kissed it. Not like the carefree, playful kisses he'd given her when he'd made fun of her in the past. This one was more sincere, and she felt a little shudder as he said it. He lowered and moved to release her hand, but she held on, causing her to involuntarily lick her lips and look down at her hand and then back up at his face. She gave him a more sincere smile than her typical flirtatious or playful one as he looked up at her. She gently pulled on his hand, guiding him to step away from the railing and toward her until they were walking hand in hand. They walked together for a short while before she finally said anything. She looked at him and said, "The truth is, Raphael, you were there for me every moment I was there for you." She gave him a gentle squeeze in return, smiling. "Before you came along, I barely had anyone I could even trust in this village, let alone care about as a friend. Now thanks to you, I've got good friends, my own genin team, and well I've got you. So really, I don't think either of us can pay the other back, since we both owe each other." Raphael gave her a gentle smile and gave a silent nod. He slowly entwined his fingers with hers and said, "I can live with that," as they left the park and made their way back to their apartment complex. Anko turned to face him as they got closer to the structure, the teasing smile coming back. She looked at him and said, "I hope you don't think I'm going to put out on the first date." After staring at her for a moment, he realized she was kidding when he heard her smile and gave a small laugh. "Certainly not, Senorita. If I was attempting that, I would have gone in a completely different direction with regards to this date. Probably some fine wine. romantic music, and seductive poetry and wordplay my mentor Ezio imparted to his male recruits for such events, he laughed. At that, Anko arched an eyebrow and paused briefly. First off, why would your mentor be teaching you stuff like that, and second of all, do you really think that would have worked? Raphael smiled at her. Well, he taught us that in case we needed to get close to female targets or informants, and probably not. You would have seen right through it and left me bloodied and bruised, if not humiliated as well. They both burst out laughing as they ascended the stairs to her apartment door. Probably would have involved you in your underwear being chased by a swarm of angry poisonous snakes through the center of the village, she mused, tapping her chin in thought. When she got there, she took out her apartment key, locked it, and turned to face him. Well, I had a very wonderful evening tonight. I hope my company was satisfactory, she asked, grinning, but her tone betrayed a tiny hint of concern. Raphael just gave her a smile and took her hand again, very gently. More than satisfactory, Anko-chan. I fear my own company must have paled in comparison, he exclaimed, kissing her hand again. But she withdrew her hand, and when he gave her a slightly confused look, she smirked and took his chin with a gentle tug, drawing him into a full kiss. After a moment, his eyes widened a little and he began to kiss her back. At last, she withdrew, freeing his chin and smiling at the startled expression on his face. I'm excited for our next date, she said, running a finger lightly over his lip. Until next time, Raphael.kun, she said as she unlocked her apartment's door and went inside. Raphael just blinked when he saw the door close, his thoughts coming back to the here and now. Then he turned away and grinned, humming to himself on his way to his own apartment. Anko, blushing, leaned against the door of her own apartment and released a breath she had been holding. With a silly smile spreading across her lips, she slowly waved her hand as if to fan her hot face and moved towards the kitchen. She went into the kitchen, got a glass of water, and drank it before going to sit down on the couch and only stopping to gesture to Hinata's door. Don't think I don't know you were spying on us, Imouto. Get some sleep before I decide to give you double the training workload tomorrow. Hinata merely laughed as she tucked herself into bed, her Byakugan now deactivated. Whatever you say, nay. Chan. By the way, was he a good kisser? Anko smiled and touched her lips as she plopped down on the couch and tried not to squeal like a schoolgirl. Shut up, she answered. The following day, Uchiha District with his arms crossed, Kakashi observed as Sasuke struck and kicked a training target, adapting to the weights he was using to gain momentum in order to aid him in their plan to defeat Gaara. He needed to improve his lightning jutsu manipulation skills in addition to his speed and stamina. Beside him were a few other Uchiha who Makoto had asked to teach Sasuke Uchiha Fire Ninjutsu and Taijutsu as well. Though he couldn't argue with the clan leader, Kakashi was still a little miffed about it because he wanted to be able to direct Sasuke's training in the direction he desired, guaranteeing Sasuke received the best training possible and dominated the finals. He could at least claim that Sasuke was committed to his training, exerting himself to the point of near fatigue in order to reap the maximum benefits from his endeavors. Thankfully, Sasuke only occasionally mentioned a very slight ache or itching from where the sealed curse seal was located. Other than that, there didn't seem to be any issues with it. He nodded as he watched Sasuke finish his current round of sparring against the dummy. Good work, Sasuke. Take 5 and then we'll put you in a real spar, he stated. With a nod, Sasuke went to where a bottle of water and a towel were waiting for him. Kakashi turned away, but froze when he noticed someone in a hoodie observing them from a rooftop. Knowing it was one of the assassins, most likely Kaseki, his eyes narrowed. He turned away, nodding to the other 2 Uchiha to take over the training, and came to stand beside the Uchiha assassin. He questioned, "What are you doing here?" Kaseki's gaze was fixed on Sasuke, not even meeting his. "I'm looking out for my clansmen. Makoto Sama has been like a mother to me, and I intend to do whatever I can to help her, especially when it comes to Sasuke," quietly she said. Kakashi just looked at her with a frown. He made Kaseki slightly stiffen as he said, "He is perfectly fine and safe with me. There is no need for you to be here. Especially since the last thing I want is someone with conflicting loyalties spying on my student." She turned her hooded head to face him and demanded, "What do you mean by conflicting loyalties, Hitaki-san? How do I have conflicting loyalties? You are a shinobi of Konoha, and of the Uchiha clan, and yet you joined that group of vigilantes operating outside the full authority of Konoha. Not to mention that 2 of your fellow members are in the finals as well. For all I know, you could be spying on Sasuke to give them an advantage," Kakashi said with a narrowed eye. With a look of pure rage on her face, Kaseki turned to face him fully and approached him, putting her face in his. Let us get one thing straight here. Even if I was that dishonest, underhanded, and willing to betray my own kinsman, those two genin wouldn't allow me to betray my clan in such a fashion. They would attempt to gather the information on their own, to improve their own skills. So don't you dare accuse me of something like that without proof. After she finished her tirade, Kakashi remained silent. Even still, if you are not part of Sasuke's training, I would ask you to leave. I do not want my training methods to be leaked to his enemies and opponents. I'm sure you understand, she heard him say. For a few moments, Kaseki glared at him before snorting. After saying, "Fine, Hitaki-san. If that will soothe your ego and paranoia," she shrugged and vanished. After giving her a scowl, Kakashi left to resume training Sasuke. In another scene, the three of them were taking a brief break from training with Anko before dividing up to train with their individual other senseis. Naruto and Ino laughed as they listened to Hinata tell them about what she saw the previous night. While Naruto was pleased that two individuals he regarded as good as family were finding happiness together, Ino thought everything was adorable and charming. Hinata laughed as she recalled that morning and said, and then this morning, she couldn't stop smiling the whole time she was making breakfast and getting ready. Anko gave the other two of them a half-hearted glare as they laughed softly alongside her. Trying to look serious, she yelled at them, "That's enough shit. Chat. You got enough energy to gossip, you can get to your sensei. Move it." "Yes, sensei," they all exclaimed, continuing to smile at her despite her grudging protests. They turned to avoid seeing the smile that had been on her face since she woke up for the majority of the day. The three genin stepped aside with a quick smile on their faces. After training today, Naruto said, "So we'll meet back up to Shadow Anko, Sensei and Raphael. Sensei, and see if they get up to any antics." The two kunoichi nodded, grinning at the prospect of using their sensei as blackmail. Following the completion of their training plans, they parted ways to meet up with their other sensei. When Naruto finally reached the training area Jiraiya had chosen for their next session, he was met with a frown upon realizing that Jiraiya was nowhere to be seen. Shutting his eyes, he gradually concentrated on his perceptions, listening for any indication of the Sannin and attempting to sense any chakra flare that might reveal his location. The sound of girls laughing was something he was not expecting to hear. With wide open eyes, he turned to face that direction, taking great care not to startle anyone. Before long, he had arrived at what seemed to be a naturally occurring hot spring. A small waterfall was continuously supplying water to the spring, creating a cloud of steam and mist when the cold water hit the hot spring's water. He flushed upon seeing a couple of girls clearly having fun, all, thankfully, wearing bathing suits. He started to turn and walk away, but stopped when he heard a deeper, more manly giggle. With a furrowed brow, he proceeded towards the origin and discovered his Sannin sensei hunched over in a bush, ogling the girls and laughing suggestively the entire time, all the while jotting down notes in a notebook. With a mere mental groan, Naruto decided to play around with Jiraiya. He took a step back and cloned a shadow figure, who nodded and vanished into the bushes. In the meantime, Naruto smiled and transformed by concentrating on his chakra. Fascinated by his study, Jiraiya didn't appear to be aware of the person in the tree branches overhead. The figure, poised, raised one of their concealed blades and descended toward Jiraiya, only to be snagged out of the air and slammed against the earth, not uprooting a single leaf or branch from the bush. Jiraiya simply sighed, disappointment and annoyance visible in his eyes as he gazed down at Naruto. "You have to get up a lot earlier than that to get the drop on me," said the man. Naruto simply shot him a quick smile. He said, "But I'm not the real attack," and then he disappeared. Simultaneously, a woman's voice called out close to him. "Eek! A pervert! Peeping Tom!" exclaimed a rather voluptuous young woman with blue eyes and two long blonde ponytails while wearing a kimono. The woman continued to scream while pointing at the bush that Jiraiya was in. Now that they were aware of the situation, the girls in the hot spring began to throw rocks, sandals, and anything else they could into the bushes while crying out for help and hastily gathering towels or robes to cover themselves. The girls hurried to gather their belongings and make their escape, forcing Jiraiya to retreat and cover himself with his arms. With a sly smile, the blonde woman vanished into a cloud of smoke, to be replaced by Naruto. Jiraiya soon joined him, staring miserably at the spot where the women had been playing and washing. "Damn it, brat, do you know how much research you just cost me?" he inquired. Naruto gave a headshake. "You're supposed to be training me, Arrow, Sennin, not perving on girls. Now what should I start on?" he inquired. "To be honest, I was hoping to speak with the leader of your summons," Jiraiya stated in a formal tone. if you wouldn't mind asking him to meet with me? At that, Naruto blinked, appearing perplexed. Why do you want to speak to him? You'll learn why when I talk to the boss summons. Now if you please, he inquired. With a scowl and a shrug, Naruto called for a fennec fox and made the request. While Jiraiya and Naruto waited silently, the fox vanished carrying the message intended for Kikite. Jiraiya decided to speak up and turned to face Naruto. So, you obviously seem quite taken with these assassins, he replied. Silently nodding, Naruto felt a little nervous. I am, yes. Why do you ask? He said, well, I mean, you just seem quite devoted to their methods and teachings. I'm just curious as to why, in an attempt to understand Naruto's perspective on the assassins and perhaps discover a weakness that would allow him to free Naruto from their grasp. The blonde genin assassin remained silent for a short while before continuing. I suppose part of it was because when I first was learning from them, I was really just a small kid who was latching onto the people I respected and admired. The first people who actually seemed to care about me. The way they described being an assassin, it sounded just like being a shinobi, except I'd be helping more people. I guess part of me felt like I would get to be a hero. At that, Jiraiya scowled a little, and Naruto went on. As I grew older though, I began to realize there is more to it than just being a hero. The assassins aren't just working to protect people. They're seeking to bring about a world of peace. A world where people set aside prejudice, anger and hatred, and can exist together in harmony. Jiraiya, stunned by what he had just heard, blurted out, how can they want peace when they kill people? In response, Naruto grinned ruefully, recalling the day when Raphael had first told him about the ironies. I would have to explain a lot more about the assassins than I'm allowed to. But really, the people we kill are those who would prevent such a world from coming about. They would either force peace onto people at the tip of a sword, or they would prevent any chance of peace because of profit, hatred, or thirst for war. I think the reason I want to be part of the assassins, besides feeling like I'm part of a family, is because I want to help make a world like they describe. A world of peace, where we can all live together, and there's no need for shinobi and assassins to kill people, said Naruto. Jiraiya felt a little shaken, but he just nodded quietly. He couldn't help but think of Minato when he heard Naruto talk with that conviction and strength in his voice. Simultaneously, he was aware that Minato attempted to converse with others and persuade them of his principles. Rather than attempting to reason with those who stood in their way, Naruto and the other assassins killed them all. But before he could reply, a puff of smoke billowed between them. A male voice, somewhat high-pitched, cried, Ni-san, as a sudden blur crashed into him, nearly bowling him over. After being slightly stunned by the blur that had collided with him, Naruto looked down into his arms, only to have his eyes enlarge upon seeing his fox friend Tomo's dog. Faced grin. He hugged Tomo, who was happily wagging his tail and wiggling and snuggling against him, and his eyes began to water slightly as he realized he was holding his first friend ever. Kikite observed the reunited couple and grinned gently. Naruto-san, it is good to see you again. Young Tomo was quite insistent in seeing you again when he heard I was being requested, he stated. With Tomo safely nestled in his arms, Naruto could only beam with happiness and nod appreciatively to Kikite. The older fox turned to face Jiraiya and gave him a nod. He questioned, you wanted to speak to me? However, Jiraiya was concentrating on Naruto and noticed the child's unadulterated happiness before turning to face Kikite. With a soft voice, he said, I think that can wait a bit, unable to express his happiness at seeing his godson and not wanting to ruin it. Sensing that the topic the Toad Sage wished to discuss was not quite appropriate at this time, Kikite just nodded before turning back to watch Naruto and Tomo. The young fox, with his tail still wagging wildly, smiled up at his human friend. I've got so much to tell you, Ni-san. And I can talk to you, isn't this great? He exclaimed with enthusiasm. With a nod, Naruto bent down, placed Tomo down, and wiped away the tears in his eyes. Yes, that is Tomo. His voice trembled a little as he said, it's really great, and I want to hear all about it. Naruto simply smiled, listening intently as everything around him faded away as he was reunited with his friend, while Tomo barked happily and went into an excited explanation of everything he had done and seen since heading to the Fennec Fox realm. Desert beyond Suna Orochimaru and his two bodyguards arrived, and the snake Sannin simply smiled and bowed his head. The cage of Suna, annoyance in his eyes, did not return the gesture. What are we doing out here, Orochimaru? You could have discussed anything concerning the impending invasion in my office, if that's necessary. I'm afraid not. San, Orochimaru yelled. This is something best talked about where there are no prying eyes or ears. All right, "What is it?" As the case cage asked, he heard gurgles behind him and turned to see both of his bodyguards standing there, their necks pierced by white bone blades from an albino youth standing between them. He whirled, golden sand gathering to strike at Orochimaru, only to have a straight blade extending from Orochimaru's mouth pierce through his chest. His eyes widened in shock. As his shinobi took his blades from the two bodyguards, Orochimaru grinned and took his sword from the case cage's corpse. "Well done, Kimimaro," he said. "With this, the final stages of my plan are coming to fruition." "As you say, Orochimaru." Sama, the young albino said, bowed his head. "And now, to finish preparations," Orochimaru said with a smile as he leaned down to the dead shinobi leader, carefully making hand signs and touching him. His smirk grew as his face started to resemble the case cage's before standing up again and becoming an exact replica of the corpse on the sand in front of him. "Konoha will burn soon," he declared, before vanishing in a shunshin with Kimimaro and the corpses in tow.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.